Hello and welcome to our channel where myths and legends come to life. In the vast world of Greek mythology, one name forever echoes with the sound of crashing waves and the endless roar of the ocean. That name is Poseidon, the mighty god of the sea, god of earthquakes, storms, and all the wild forces of nature. His power knew no bounds. Yet there was so much more to this enigmatic deity than met the eye. Today we're diving deep into the realm of Poseidon to uncover the mysteries that lie beneath the surface. So grab your oars, fellow myth enthusiasts, and let's embark on a journey across the ocean of mythology to discover the secrets of Poseidon. Poseidon was one of the three great brothers who ruled the cosmos. Alongside Zeus, the ruler of the sky, and Hades, the lord of the underworld, Poseidon held dominion over one of the most mysterious and unpredictable realms, the ocean. Now, the Greek Ocean wasn't just a body of water for swimming and fishing. Oh no! It was a vast and dangerous realm full of mythical creatures, treacherous currents, and hidden treasures. From the sun's journey each day to the depths of Tartarus, every aspect of this watery world was under Poseidon's watchful gaze. He was the protector of sailors, guiding their ships through stormy seas and punishing those who dared to cross him. Fishermen cast their nets in hope of his favor, for a bountiful catch meant prosperity for their villages. But those who angered Poseidon could expect their boats to be tossed about like toys in a tempest, or even dragged down to the ocean floor by monstrous tentacles. But Poseidon's reach extended far beyond the waves. He was a force to be reckoned with on land as well, controlling the very earth itself. Earthquakes shook the ground at his command, reminding mortals that they were at the mercy of the gods. His presence was felt in the depths of the earth, the fury of volcanoes and the gushing waters of springs. Even the mighty Atlas, condemned to hold up the heavens for all eternity, was said to have been cursed by Poseidon, forever chaining him to the earth. Poseidon's power over nature was not absolute, though. In a world where the gods were constantly vying for dominance, he often clashed with his siblings and other deities. Remember the story of the giant typhoon? Well, Poseidon had a hand in that too, calling upon the monster to wreak havoc as part of Gaia's army against the Olympian gods. And who could forget his infamous battle with the sea monster Cetus, a terrifying beast that threatened the safety of mortal men. But despite these epic conflicts, Poseidon also formed alliances, forging a special bond with the goddess Amphitrite, whom he married to establish a divine dynasty that would rule the seas for generations to come. Now, you might be thinking that with all this power, Poseidon must have been a serious, maybe even a grumpy god, right? Well, not exactly. Beneath that imposing exterior beat the heart of a true bon vivant, a lover of parties, feasts, and the finer things in life. There was no god who enjoyed a good celebration more than Poseidon. Just imagine the scene. The crashing waves providing the perfect soundtrack to a divine bash on the shores of an enchanted island. Gods and goddesses from across the cosmos gathered to dance the night away, reveling in the intoxicating rhythms of celebration. For Poseidon, these gatherings were more than just a chance to let loose. They were a way to solidify alliances, broker deals, and maintain order in his domain. After all, ruling the seas wasn't just about brute strength. It was also about diplomacy, strategy, and knowing when to throw a legendary party. But, as we all know, throwing epic parties is only half the fun. You need an epic palace to go with it. Enter the Palace of Poseidon, a place where opulence knew no bounds. Picture this, an enormous structure rising majestically from the ocean, adorned with intricate carvings and shimmering mosaics that depicted scenes from the most epic battles to the tamer joys of sea life. The palace's vast halls echoed with the laughter of gods and the murmur of mortals seeking the favor of the sea god. But the real magic happened when the sun dipped below the horizon. That's when the palace walls shimmered and transformed, becoming a magnificent spectacle of light that could be seen for miles around. To mortals, it looked like a mirage, a trick of the light on the waves. But to those who were initiated into the secrets of the gods, it was a symbol of Poseidon's immense power and his love for all things grand and glorious. Despite his many godly attributes, Poseidon wasn't always the picture of composure. No, my friends, he had a playful side as well, a mischievous streak that often got him into trouble. One moment he might be enjoying a nice game of chess with his brother Hades, the next he's pulling a prank on unsuspecting mortals. Just remember the story of the Trojan War. Poseidon was on the side of the Greeks, but his loyalty wasn't unwavering. When Athena and Apollo bested him in a contest to become the patron deity of the city of Troy, he decided to throw a little shade their way. Poseidon cursed the Trojans, dooming them to never know true peace and security. That curse hung over the city like a dark cloud, eventually culminating in the devastating events of the Trojan War. But Poseidon's playful side wasn't always so destructive. He also had a deep appreciation for art, music, and poetry. And he wasn't afraid to show his support for those who shared his passion. Once he even took the form of a dolphin to befriend a young musician named Terpander, recognizing his extraordinary talent and wanting to help him achieve immortality. Dolphins, of course, are known for their grace, intelligence, and playfulness, making them the perfect companions for a god with such a diverse personality. As we continue to explore the depths of Poseidon's character, we'll encounter tales that highlight his darker side as well. Remember the story of Medusa? That terrifying gorgon with snakes for hair and a gaze that turned men to stone. Well, Poseidon had a part in that too. When he made unwanted advances towards the goddess Athena, she turned him into a donkey out of spite. And later, when he sought refuge in a cave, Athena tricked him into sleeping with Medusa, who was hiding in the cave in her mortal form. It was a cruel trick, but it also led to the birth of some truly fascinating creatures, including Pegasus, the winged horse, and Chrysaor, a giant with a golden sword. So you see, even in the darkest of tales, there's always a glimmer of something new and unexpected waiting to be discovered. But perhaps no aspect of Poseidon's character is more intriguing than his relationships with mortals. Unlike some of the other Olympians who kept their romantic interests strictly divine, Poseidon wasn't afraid to cross the line. He had numerous affairs with human women, which led to the birth of some truly legendary heroes. Let's take Perseus, for example. This mortal hero was the son of Zeus and the mortal woman Danae, but his father was a bit of a deadbeat dad. So it was Poseidon who stepped in to guide and assist Perseus on his perilous adventures. Together, they faced down monsters, gods, and even the wrath of Poseidon's own brother, Zeus. In the end, Poseidon's legacy was one of contradictions, a being of immense power and grace, capable of both great wisdom and terrible destruction. He was a reminder that even the mightiest of gods were not immune to the complexities of love, loss, betrayal, and redemption. As we navigate the choppy waters of Greek mythology, remember that every wave has its crest and its trough, just like the god of the sea himself. And now it's time for you to take the helm, dear viewers. What are your thoughts on Poseidon? Do you find him to be a relatable figure, a powerful yet playful leader who also knows how to let loose and have fun? Or do you see him as a cautionary tale, a reminder that even the gods can make mistakes and cause pain? From the very beginning, his fate was tied to water. The Greeks believed that every wave, every river, every drop of rain was a reflection of Poseidon's power and presence. And just like his father, the all-encompassing Cronus, he was the god of many things, earthquakes too. Whenever the earth trembled, they knew it was Poseidon stirring in his underwater realm. They were both linked by water, ruler of the skies, father of earthquakes, and master of the seas. But what did this mean for the mortals who lived under his domain? How did Poseidon shape their world? Why did he help some and punish others? And what secrets did the ancient Greeks uncover about him through their myths and legends? Let's find out in today's episode, part 2 of Poseidon and the mysteries of the Greek Ocean. Welcome back, everyone. Here we continue our series exploring the fascinating world of Greek mythology. Today we dive deep into the mysteries surrounding Poseidon, the powerful god of the sea. In part 1, we uncovered how Poseidon, along with his 5 brothers, played a pivotal role in bringing order to the chaotic primordial waters, giving rise to the first dry land and shaping the Earth's physical features. We also learned about Poseidon's sacred sites, the sacred kings, the cults, and worship in his honor. Now we're ready to explore the intriguing ways Poseidon influenced the lives of ancient Greeks, the impact of his blessings and curses, and the secrets hidden in his myths and legends. So buckle up as we journey further into the world of Greek mythology. Don't forget to support us. And let's dive into the myths. For the people of ancient Greece, the sea was both a gift and a danger. It brought fish and trade, yet it could also swallow ships whole without mercy. To them, Poseidon was both protector and punisher. When sailors set sail, they prayed to Poseidon for safe passage, just as they appeased him when they reached port. Fishermen cast offerings into the waves before hauling in their nets, hoping for a bountiful catch. But if a storm brewed or a ship went missing, fingers were pointed at Poseidon's wrath. He was the reason, they believed, for the sudden squalls that capsized boats and the rogue waves that dragged men under. His mood, as unpredictable as the tides, could turn from calm to furious in an instant. And so they learned to respect him, to fear him, but most of all to understand him. They needed to understand his moods, his whims, his nature, if they were to thrive on the Aegean. Poseidon wasn't just the god of the sea, he was also the god of horses. This might seem like an oddity to us, but to the Greeks it made perfect sense. Horses were not just animals, they were partners, extensions of human will. Just like ships on the water, they were swift, powerful, and potentially dangerous, much like the sea itself. And just as sailors needed to know the winds and currents, horsemen needed to understand the animal they rode. So Poseidon's wisdom extended to both, teaching them how to harness these forces and guiding them in their pursuits. His influence wasn't limited to the physical world. He was a force in the realm of human emotions too. Ever felt that inexplicable pull towards the sea, the urge to explore the unknown depths? That was Poseidon's touch, inspiring wonder, curiosity, and a thirst for adventure. He was the embodiment of the human spirit's desire to conquer the untamed, to probe the mysteries that lay beyond the familiar shores. In ancient Greece, there was no separation between the spiritual and material. Everything was interconnected. Everything had a story. Poseidon was not just a god, he was a storyteller. Through his interactions with mortals, he wove tales that explained the unexplainable, gave meaning to their experiences. He was the author of their fates, the architect of their destinies. But why was Poseidon drawn to these interactions? What did he gain from these partnerships? Was it simply the satisfaction of being revered, the pleasure of having his will done? Or was there something more, something deeper that bound the god of the sea to the realm of mortals? Perhaps it was the challenges, the problems they faced that intrigued him, the way they struggled, adapted, evolved. Maybe he found amusement in their ingenuity, their resilience, or maybe, just maybe, he saw in them a reflection of himself, a reminder of his own origins. After all, he too had risen from the primordial chaos, had carved his place in the world much like the fishermen who hauled their boats from the depths or the sailors who braved the storms. He understood their tenacity, their daring, their connection to the sea. What sets Poseidon apart from the other gods is his unique ability to appear in various forms, each reflecting different aspects of his vast domain. Sometimes he was seen as a majestic stallion thundering across the plains, symbolizing his mastery over earthquakes and the earth. At other times, he emerged as a dolphin, leaping playfully in the waves, showcasing his affinity for the sea and its creatures. These transformations weren't mere tricks, they were lessons. They taught the Greeks to be adaptable, to be aware of the many faces of the divine, and to respect the mystery that lay at the heart of existence. But it's his most famous shapeshift that truly captures the essence of Poseidon, the human form. By assuming this guise, Poseidon bridged the gap between the gods and mortals. He became one of them, experiencing life on their terms, sharing their joys and sorrows, their hopes and dreams. This act of empathy, of walking in their shoes, made him more than just a powerful deity. It made him relatable, human, a part of their stories. Consider the tale of Demeter and Persephone. This wasn't just a myth, it was a testament to the cyclical nature of life, death, and rebirth, a cycle that Poseidon too understood. Just as the sea ebbed and flowed, the earth had its seasons, and just as he controlled the tides, he respected the rhythms of the natural world. Now, imagine you're a simple fisherman casting your net into the sea. You've heard tales of Poseidon's wrath, of how quickly he can turn from benevolent god to vengeful lord. Yet you need to fish. Your family depends on it, so you take your chances. As you haul in your net, you find an enormous fish, one that you've never seen before. Its scales shimmer with an otherworldly glow. Its eyes seem to hold ancient wisdom. You've caught no ordinary fish. It's a manifestation of Poseidon himself. How does this change your perspective of him? Does it shift from fear to fascination, from reverence to curiosity? How does this encounter change your understanding of the world? Let's take a look at another aspect of Poseidon's character, his relationships with other deities. He wasn't just a solitary figure, but was deeply involved in the affairs of the gods and the creation of new life. His union with a Titan goddess Amphitrite, for example, resulted in the birth of Triton, a creature with the upper body of a handsome young man and the tail of a fish. Triton wasn't just a symbol of the union between land and sea, he was also a messenger, a herald of his father's will. Similarly, Poseidon's interaction with Medusa, the Gorgon, despite its tragic outcome, reveals another facet of his character. Some versions of the myth portray Poseidon as a victim of circumstance, while others show him as a victim of his own desires. In both cases, the story explores themes of power, temptation, and the consequences of unchecked desire. These myths are not just stories. They're keys to understanding the complexities of Poseidon. They reveal his many sides, his strengths and weaknesses, his triumphs and tragedies. Each myth adds a layer to his character, making him more than just a mighty god, but a multifaceted being with whom humans could identify. To truly appreciate Poseidon, we must look at how the ancient Greeks portrayed him in their art. Sculptures like the bronze Poseidon from the sea at the British Museum capture his power and majesty, while vase paintings depict his more playful side. These artistic representations aren't just aesthetic, they're a visual narrative of the god's character, his connection to the sea, his love for horses, and his interactions with mortals. So, what do we learn about Poseidon from all this? We learn that he wasn't just a fearsome deity, but a complex, multidimensional being. He was a god of immense power, yet he had weaknesses and flaws. He was capable of great love, but also of terrible anger. He was a bringer of life and a taker of life. In essence, he embodied the duality of existence, the balance between creation and destruction, between joy and sorrow, between life and death. And it was this complexity, this ability to embody the full spectrum of human experience that made Poseidon more than just a god. He became a teacher, a guide, a mirror reflecting humanity's own struggles, aspirations, and place in the grand tapestry of existence. We've been exploring the many faces of Poseidon, the Greek god of the sea. From the ferocious warrior to the provider of earthquakes, we've seen how he commands both the waters and the earth. Now we delve into the third aspect of his divine nature, his role as the lord of the wild horses. In today's episode, we'll uncover the symbolism behind the bridle that controlled Poseidon's power, the connection between horses and the mysteries of the sea, and the legends that reveal the true meaning of untamed strength. But before we dive into this watery world, let's take a moment to appreciate your presence. If you find our videos intriguing and informative, please support us by hitting the like button and subscribing for more captivating content. Now let's continue our exploration of Poseidon and the mysteries of the Greek Ocean. He was often portrayed as a strong and commanding figure, his long beard flowing like sea foam, his eyes as deep as the abyss, and always in his hand the great trident that symbolized his authority. Poseidon's connection to horses is deeply rooted in the ancient Greek culture, and his image as the lord of the wild horses is a powerful one indeed. It speaks to the untamed spirit of these magnificent creatures and their ability to evoke both awe and terror. But what exactly does it mean to be the lord of the wild horses? And what are the deeper layers of symbolism hidden within this aspect of Poseidon's character? To understand Poseidon's association with horses, we must first explore the symbolism of the horse itself in Greek mythology. Horses were considered sacred animals, representing freedom, power, and the connection between the mortal and divine realms. They were seen as messengers of the gods, capable of transporting souls to the afterlife. In fact, one of the most famous horses in mythology is Arion, who was half horse and half human. He was beloved by Poseidon and was said to have the ability to control other horses with his magical flute playing. Aryan's story symbolizes the harmony and balance that can be achieved between humanity and the natural world through music and art. Now let's delve into the concept of wild horses. These untamed creatures roamed freely over the land, representing the untamed aspects of nature itself. They were symbols of raw power and energy, and those who could tame them were seen as true heroes. Taming a wild horse was no easy feat. It required skill, courage, and a deep understanding of the animal's nature, and it was seen as a test of one's character and abilities. In many ways, it was a metaphor for conquering the chaos of nature and bringing order to it. Now let's bring these two aspects of horse symbolism together and see how they relate to Poseidon. As the lord of the seas, Poseidon was seen as a tamer of the wild waters. Just as a wild horse can be both majestic and dangerous, so too can the ocean be both beautiful and terrifying. Poseidon's mastery over the seas was a testament to his strength and power, and his ability to control the waves and winds was seen as a reflection of his ability to tame the wildest of beasts. But the symbolism goes even deeper than that. The horse's mane and tail flowing in the wind were seen as symbols of the movement of the water. The horse's hooves pounding the earth were seen as echoes of the crashing waves. And the horse's breath, which could shake the ground beneath it, was seen as a reminder of the earthquakes that Poseidon was also known to cause. The bridle that was used to control the horse became a powerful symbol of Poseidon's own power over the seas. The bridle represented the tamer's ability to bring order to the wildness of the horse, to channel its energy and direct it towards a desired outcome. This is a metaphor for Poseidon's ability to harness the power of the ocean and direct it as he sees fit. But the bridle also had a darker side to it. Just as a horse can be tamed, so too can it be broken. The bit that goes into the horse's mouth is a symbol of pain and submission, and the whip that is used to control the horse is a reminder of the harsh realities of training these wild animals. This is a reflection of the dangers that lurk beneath the surface of the seemingly calm waters. For while the ocean may appear serene and beautiful from afar, it can quickly turn violent and destructive when angered by the gods or disturbed by natural forces. Now, let's explore some of the ancient Greek myths and legends that reveal the true meaning of Poseidon's association with the horses. In one myth, Poseidon is said to have fallen in love with a beautiful woman named Amphitrite. But Amphitrite was already engaged to another suitor, and she was not interested in Poseidon. So the god of the sea decided to use his powers to force her to become his wife. He sent a giant squid monster to attack her, but she escaped and fled to the shore. There she was transformed into a seahorse, and Poseidon pursued her until she reached the high peaks of a mountain. Finally, she agreed to become his wife, and they were married in a grand ceremony. This myth is a reminder of the lengths to which Poseidon would go to get what he wants, and it shows the power of his love and desire. Another myth tells the story of Medusa, who was once a beautiful woman, but was transformed into a hideous monster with a snake for hair after angering Athena. She lived on an island far from human civilization, but Poseidon invaded her sanctuary and assaulted her, which resulted in the birth of winged horses. This myth shows the dark side of Poseidon's character, and it reveals the consequences of his actions. Finally, there's the legend of Theseus, who was a hero in Greek mythology. He was known for his many adventures, including his journey to find the golden fleece. But one of his greatest challenges was his battle against the Minotaur, a creature with the head of a bull and the body of a man who lived in a labyrinth. Theseus was helped in his quest by Ariadne, who gave him a ball of string to help him navigate the maze. However, when he returned home, he forgot about Ariadne and left her stranded on the island. Poseidon took pity on her and transformed her into a horse, allowing her to roam freely over the land. This myth shows the mercy and compassion that Poseidon was capable of, and it reminds us of the importance of remembering those who have helped us on our journeys. Through these myths and legends, we see the many faces of Poseidon, the lord of the wild horses. He is a god of immense power and strength, but he's also capable of great love and compassion. His association with horses allows us to explore the depths of his character and the complexities of his divine nature. As we continue our journey through the world of Greek mythology, we will undoubtedly encounter many more fascinating creatures and epic tales. But the lessons we learn from figures like Poseidon will continue to guide us as we navigate the challenges and complexities of life. And so our exploration of Poseidon, the Greek god of the sea, comes to an end. We've seen how he was a fierce warrior, a powerful ruler, and a master of the wild horses. Through his many adventures and encounters, we've learned about the strength, wisdom, and compassion that he possessed. But perhaps most importantly, we've seen how his relationship with humans was complex and often fraught with peril. Despite his immense power and glory, Poseidon was not beyond making mistakes or showing mercy. He was a reminder that even the gods were not perfect, and that they too had to face the consequences of their actions. As we reflect on Poseidon's journey, we are reminded of the importance of embracing our own strength and power, but also of the need for wisdom, compassion, and humility. May his story inspire us to be better versions of ourselves and to strive for excellence in all we do. And now we turn to you, dear viewers, to share your thoughts and insights. What did you find most fascinating about Poseidon, the Greek god of the sea? How has his story shaped your understanding of Greek mythology and its timeless themes? But this victory was not without its casualties. Gaia, the earth goddess, was grievously wounded by Typhon's poison, so much so that she even considered ending her own life. And who can blame her? After all, what is there to live for after the death of one's children? To cheer up his mother, Poseidon took it upon himself to visit every corner of the earth, doing his best to bring happiness and beauty to every land. And what better way to do this than to impregnate every beautiful woman he came across? Before we continue, now back to our regularly scheduled program. As you can imagine, Poseidon's extracurricular activities caused quite a stir among the other Olympians. For example, when he impregnated the Theban princess Semele, she was almost killed by Zeus's jealousy. In fact, had Hermes not intervened at the last minute, she would have been vaporized into a pile of ashes. A similar fate befell the Ethiopian queen Asteria, who bore the Titan god Atlas as a result of an affair with Poseidon. According to Hesiod, the only reason why Zeus allowed Poseidon to get away with this behavior was because he was his brother. Otherwise, he would have been thrown out of Olympus for being a total pervert. In fact, Zeus even tried to set some boundaries. He told Poseidon that he couldn't sleep with any dryads who were younger than the age of consent, which was 500 years old. You know, just because you're a god doesn't mean you don't have to follow the law. However, Poseidon ignored his brother's wishes and slept with a dryad named Deidamia, whereupon Zeus turned her into a bay tree. Apparently, the god of the sea has a thing for trees. He also fell in love with the Theban princess Althea, but she rejected him because he was ugly. Okay, to be fair, this one's not really true. Ancient Greek writers describe Poseidon as being exceptionally good looking. Even Homer, who wasn't exactly a fan of the guy, admitted that he possessed the qualities that made people fall in love. However, Homer also suggested that Poseidon's good looks were a bit outdated, like an old man trying to look hip and trendy by wearing flashy jewelry and perfume. Overall, though, he was considered to be quite attractive, so it's unlikely that Althea was repelled by his appearance. The story probably comes from a misunderstanding. Perhaps Althea didn't reject Poseidon because of how he looked, but because of how he acted. Poseidon wasn't known for being the most sensitive guy around. And if Althea said or did something that offended him, he might have taken it out on her by turning her into a laurel tree. This may seem a bit unfair, especially since she didn't do anything wrong. But remember that this is the same guy who turned a young man named Themis into a donkey for criticizing his poetry. In fact, according to Hesiod, Poseidon had such a bad reputation for getting pissed off that even the gods were afraid of him. And what god wouldn't be afraid of Poseidon? I mean, the guy literally wielded a magical spear that could shatter cliffs with a single strike, summon tidal waves that could drown entire cities, or shake the very earth beneath one's feet. That's kind of terrifying if you think about it. The trident was no ordinary weapon. It was a force of nature, an extension of Poseidon's own power. And yet, despite its awesome destructive potential, ancient Greek artists rarely depicted it in their sculptures and paintings. Instead, they preferred to show him holding a three-pronged spear or scepter, which was much safer to use. The reason for this is pretty simple. Unlike the trident, the three-pronged spear was a tool used by mortal men. It was something they were familiar with, whereas the trident was not. I mean, nobody's gonna mistake a three-pronged spear for a dolphin, right? However, this lack of familiarity didn't stop them from depicting Poseidon's chariot, drawn by 4 immortal seahorses, each with 6 golden reins attached to their bridle. The chariot itself was often shown as being pulled by dolphins or hippocampi, a creature that was half horse and half dolphin. Honestly, these guys got to chill in the sea whenever they weren't busy driving Poseidon's chariot. What's not to love? Overall, the Greeks associated a lot of sea creatures with Poseidon. In addition to dolphins and hippocamps, there were also whales, sea turtles, fish, lobsters, and crabs. He was even said to have created the first fishing nets. On land, his main animal companions were horses, bulls, and goats. Funnily enough, the ancient Greeks believed that goats were actually Poseidon's sacred animal, even though Zeus was the one who domesticated them. Anyway, Poseidon's numerous lovers and illegitimate children gave him another reputation, that of a seducer. But let's be honest, this was just another perk of being a god. During the Trojan War, he sided with the Achaeans, perhaps because his daughter, the Trojan princess Andromache, was in danger of being killed. During the final battle, he sent a giant squid monster called Scylla to harass the Achaean ships, even though they were on the verge of winning the war. Poseidon did this because he was pissed off at Odysseus for blinding his son, Polyphemus the Cyclops. I guess you could say that Poseidon was a bit of a softie when it came to family matters. He might have been okay with humans getting the crap beaten out of them, but he drew the line when somebody hurt his kids. So where did this tendency to overprotect his children come from? Well, maybe it had something to do with the fact that he wasn't always sure if they were really his. Remember, the guy slept with everything that moved, and then some things that didn't move. Of all his illegitimate children, perhaps the most famous was Theseus, the hero who slew the Minotaur. According to some accounts, Theseus was the son of Poseidon and Athena, a mortal princess who was raped by the god while she was gathering firewood. Interestingly enough, Athena wasn't too bothered by the pregnancy, seeing as she had already been promised to King Aegeus of Athens, who was totally unaware that she was carrying Poseidon's child. When Theseus was born, Athena left him in a cave and went to live with King Aegeus. This may sound cruel, but she did it to protect her son from the wrath of Zeus, who hated Poseidon with a burning passion. Now that you mention it, Poseidon must have been a real handful as a kid. I mean, Zeus threw him into Tartarus for 5 years just because he tricked the Cyclopes into giving him a set of thunderbolts, and he banished him to a cave for 5 more years just because he released Pandora and unleashed evil into the world. Not exactly the behavior you'd expect from a laid-back god of the sea. Granted, those were special circumstances, but still, I think you can see where Zeus was coming from. Over time, Poseidon became less of a nuisance and more of a force to be reckoned with. He defeated the Titans, created the first cities, and established colonies all over the Mediterranean. He was instrumental in helping mortals settle down and live together in organized communities instead of living in caves and hunting animals. In a sense, he was the patron god of civilization, and as such, he received more worship than any other Olympian except Zeus. In fact, there were whole cults dedicated to him all over Greece. Every city had at least one temple, and there were even festivals held in his honor. The most important of these was the Hippia, celebrated on the island of Delos. Today, we tend to forget that Poseidon played such a pivotal role in Greek mythology. Most people don't even realize that he was one of the 12 Olympians. Maybe that's because he never received the same level of adoration as Zeus, Hades, or Apollo. Or maybe it's because the Romans identified him with their god Neptune, who was basically an afterthought in their religion. Whatever the reason, Poseidon's contributions to Greek mythology should not be underestimated. He was a complex, multifaceted god whose influence extended far beyond the realm of the sea. But the trident was not only for destruction. With a gentle motion, Poseidon could calm the seas, smooth the waves, and bless sailors with safe passage across dangerous waters. But there were times when even he couldn't control the ocean's fury. Such was the case during the battle between the gods and the giants, an epic clash that shook the very foundations of the cosmos. The Gigantomachy, as it was later named, had been brewing for quite some time. The giants, children of Gaia, the Earth Mother, personified all the forces of nature, earthquakes, floods, storms, and pestilence. They were massive in size and strength, each one representing a different aspect of the Earth's untamed power. Now, despite their colossal might, the giants had never waged war against the gods. Instead, they lived deep within the recesses of the earth, heeding the warnings of their mother to stay away from the Olympian heights. But one giant, Alcyone, son of Gaia and Uranus, didn't heed his mother's advice. Impetuous and headstrong, he led a band of giants towards Olympus, eager to test his strength against the gods. Poseidon felt the tremors of the earth as the giants approached. He knew this wasn't just another raid. This was a full-scale assault, and so he took his place alongside his fellow Olympians, his trident held high. The battle was fierce and long. The ground trembled under the weight of the giants. Their clubs and swords clashed against the godly weapons. And as they fought, the giants grew in strength, drawing power from the earth itself. It was as if the very essence of the world was being wrenched from its foundations, thrown into the maelstrom of battle. The gods fought valiantly, but for all their skill and power, they began to tire. Even Zeus, supreme leader of the Olympians, was wounded, his head gashed open by the giant Typhon. Hope seemed to dwindle with each passing moment. The giants, invigorated by their earthborn powers, pressed their attack. Then Poseidon made a decision. He would use his greatest weapon, a weapon that could sway the very tides of fate, a weapon that was also his most personal. Summoning every ounce of strength, Poseidon plunged his trident deep into the ocean. A mighty surge of water erupted from the depths, a colossal wave that dwarfed the greatest krakens and leviathans. With a roar that echoed through the cosmos, the wave crashed upon the assembled giants. In that instant, the tide of battle turned. Many giants were swept away, tossed like driftwood in the fury of the sea. Some were drowned, their bodies crushed under the relentless pressure of the water. Others were hurled against the rocks, their earthborn powers nullified by the salty spray of the ocean. The giants who had seemed so invincible, so representative of the earth's untamable might, were no match for Poseidon's watery wrath. And yet, despite the ferocity of the assault, Poseidon hesitated to deliver the final blow. There was a part of him, a part that understood that the giants were merely children of the earth. Misguided, yes, but not inherently evil. As he looked upon the battered forms of the giants, he saw not monsters, but creatures of immense power and primal beauty. Among them, he saw Alcyoneus, the giant who had dared to lead the assault. His skin was the color of rich soil, his hair a tangle of roots and vines. Despite his wounds, there was a nobility in his bearing, a courage that had not been cowed by the watery onslaught. In that moment, Poseidon made a choice. He would spare Alcyoneus, offering him a chance at redemption, a way to atone for his impetuosity. Poseidon approached Alcyoneus, his trident lowered. The other giants watched, bewildered by this sudden turn of events. What was Poseidon going to do? Would he show mercy to the giant who had led the attack? Alcyoneus too was surprised, his eyes filled with a mixture of defiance and curiosity. He had expected nothing less than death, and here was Poseidon offering him something else, something that sounded almost like a bargain. Alcyoneus, Poseidon rumbled, his voice echoing with the power of the ocean. You have shown great strength and courage today, but your actions have also caused great pain and suffering. I could end your life right now, and it would be a just punishment for your deeds. Alcyoneus snorted, a sound like rocks grinding together. I fear not death, god of the sea, he boomed. My life is bound to the earth. What would you have me do? Poseidon looked out over the ravaged landscape, the battle between the gods and the giants having left deep scars upon the earth. He turned back to Alcyoneus, his expression grave. The earth is wounded, he said, and I believe you can help heal her. Alcyoneus frowned, his brow furrowing like the roots of an ancient oak. How can I, a giant, help the earth? You are one of the earth's children, Poseidon said. You are strong, you are patient, and you have shown great courage. Use these gifts, Alcyoneus, to aid the earth. Help the mortals who dwell upon her. Prove yourself worthy, not in war, but in service, and perhaps then you can atone for what you have done. A heavy silence fell. Alcyoneus looked down at his hands, the hands that had wielded such destruction, now seeming so small and vulnerable. Then he looked up at Poseidon, his eyes filled with a new resolve. So be it, he rumbled. I, Alcyoneus, son of Gaia and Uranus, will serve the earth and the mortals upon her. As the other giants were either banished or imprisoned, Alcyoneus went about his task. Under Poseidon's watchful eye, he used his immense strength to rebuild what the giants had destroyed. He coaxed life back into the barren lands, nurturing plants and animals until they thrived once more. He helped mortals with their labors, making the difficult tasks seem effortless. It was a slow and arduous process, but Alcyoneus persevered. Years turned into decades, and the earth began to heal under Alcyoneus' touch. The mortals, initially wary of the giant, came to respect and even love him. They told stories of his kindness and his strength, tales that were carried on the winds and whispered by the waves. Poseidon watched over this, a sense of pride growing within him. He had taken a risk, offering Alcyoneus a chance at redemption, but it seemed to have paid off. The giant had proven himself capable of great things, not through war and destruction, but through service and compassion. One day, after centuries of toil, Alcyoneus stood upon a mountain peak, looking out over the earth, which was now more vibrant and prosperous than ever before. He felt the weight of his past deeds, but he also felt the satisfaction of what he had accomplished. In the distance, he saw Poseidon watching him, a small smile gracing the god's lips. Alcyoneus knew in that moment that he had not only atoned for his past, but had also found a new purpose. He was no longer a giant of destruction, but a force for creation, a servant of the earth and all who lived upon it. And so the tale of Alcyoneus, the giant who became a healer, was passed down through the ages, a testament to the power of second chances and the transformative nature of service. For even the mightiest of giants can find redemption, and even the fiercest of warriors can discover the true meaning of strength. As we discussed in part 1 of this 2-part episode, Poseidon was the god who ruled over the seas, the oceans, and everything in between. He also had control over earthquakes and was known for his wrath and ability to cause storms at sea. For many of his followers and worshippers, they would pray to him before beginning their journeys across the sea, whether they be sailors or fishermen. And when it came to fishing, they wanted to make sure that he was in a good mood. You can imagine how dangerous it could be out there if he wasn't. Poseidon was one of the 3 major gods of the Greek pantheon, along with Hades and Zeus. But there were so many other gods, goddesses, nymphs, and other beings who lived within the waters that it was believed Poseidon had to delegate some of his duties. One of these figures was Glaucus, who was the son of the sea god Nereus and the brother of the famous Amphitrite, who was eventually married to Poseidon. While we don't have too much information about him, what we do know is pretty interesting. According to Hesiod, the Theogony, he was a very skilled fisherman and loved to spend his days doing just that. But one day while he was out in the water, he decided to stray a little farther than normal. This is when he discovered a new and uninhabited island, and upon seeing it, he immediately claimed it for himself and began to settle down there. We don't know exactly why he did this. Maybe he wanted to be away from his father's prying eyes. After all, Nereus was one of the older gods and was definitely a bit overprotective of his children. Or maybe he just wanted to be on his own and carve out his own path in life. Either way, he made the island his home and started fishing and hunting to sustain himself. Now, we don't know how long this lasted, but eventually his father found out where he had gone and became furious. You see, according to the laws of the gods, no one was allowed to settle on an island without first asking permission from Poseidon. So when Nereus realized what his son had done, he went straight to the king of the gods and complained. Poseidon was indeed furious, not because someone had settled on his island, but because it was his son who had done it without asking first. In his rage, he struck Glaucus with a trident and transformed him into a dolphin. Now, some versions say that Poseidon did this to punish him for his actions, but others say that he actually did it out of love. The reason being that Glaucus was destined to die a horrible death by being eaten by a giant octopus. So instead of letting that happen, Poseidon saved him by turning him into a dolphin. Either way, he was now forever bound to the sea and was no longer immortal. Now, dolphins are known for their grace, cuteness, and intelligence. But back in those days, people didn't really know much about them and hadn't really had much contact with them either. They were only seen out in the open ocean or when they chose to come closer to shore. So when people saw a dolphin for the first time, they assumed it was just some kind of fish. That was until they saw what it could actually do. Dolphins were seen as playful creatures who seemed to enjoy being around humans. They were curious and would often swim up to boats and try to interact with the crew. At first, people thought this was a little odd, but they soon realized that dolphins could actually be very helpful. They were great at spotting schools of fish and would often lead fishermen right to them. They were also great at protecting boats from other animals like sharks. So it's easy to see how people started to believe that they were some kind of divine creature. In fact, it was said that dolphins were actually the souls of people who had once been fishermen. They were skilled and hard-working men who had spent most of their lives at sea. When they died, their souls were taken by Poseidon and made into dolphins because he knew they would be happiest there. Glaucus was honored by being turned into the first dolphin. And from then on, whenever a dolphin was spotted, people would assume that it was a soul of a former fisherman. They would often leave offerings of fish or other food in the water as a way of showing their respect. And sometimes they would even build small shrines on the beach dedicated to the dolphins. People believed that if they did these things, the dolphins would be more likely to help them out on their fishing trips. And so it was that Glaucus and the dolphins became one of the first mysteries of the Greek ocean. But there were many others who would follow. As time went on, people started to explore more of the world and make contact with other cultures. They learned about different religions and mythologies, and some of these beliefs eventually made their way into the Greek ocean. One example of this was the worship of the Egyptian goddess Isis. She was originally a minor goddess, but she eventually became one of the most important figures in the Egyptian pantheon. She was seen as a mother goddess who could protect her children and help them on their journeys. This was especially appealing to fishermen and sailors who were always risking their lives when they went out to sea. So it's not surprising that many of them started to pray to Isis for help. Another example of this was the worship of the Roman goddess Minerva. She was the goddess of wisdom and strategy, and she was also seen as a protector of sailors and fishermen. Many fishermen would pray to her for a successful catch or a safe journey home, and some would even build small shrines on their boats dedicated to her. Of course, these weren't the only deities that were worshipped during the time of ancient Greece. There were many others who were popular among fishermen and sailors, such as Amphitrite, the wife of Poseidon, and Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty. But these two stood out as being the most popular. There were also many other figures who were part of the Greek ocean, such as the Sirens, the Scylla and Charybdis, and of course the Kraken. These were all terrifying creatures who were said to live in the depths of the ocean, and they were responsible for the deaths of many sailors and fishermen. To protect themselves from these creatures, people would often carry charms or amulets with them that were supposed to ward off evil spirits. They would also tell stories of the dangers of the sea and the creatures that lived there, and they would warn younger people to be careful and respectful when out on the water. And lastly, there were the mermaids. They were said to be the daughters of Poseidon and were known for their beautiful singing voices. They would lure sailors and fishermen onto their ships and then either make them walk the plank or simply drown them in the sea. Some mermaids were actually kind and would help out fishermen by leading them to schools of fish or warning them of dangerous storms. But overall, they were a mysterious and somewhat terrifying part of the Greek ocean. So there you have it, the mysteries of the Greek ocean. Whether you believe in these myths or not, there's no denying that they're a fascinating part of ancient Greek culture. They give us insight into the fears and beliefs of the people who lived back then. In today's episode, we're going to continue to explore the mysteries of the ocean with more stories from ancient Greece. The Greeks had a fascinating relationship with the sea, both as sailors who thrived on its bounty and as worshippers of the deities that ruled it. And just like the sea itself, these deities were often seen as powerful, unpredictable, and awe-inspiring. So let's get started. To the Greeks, this duality, fury and calm, storm and peace, was the very nature of Poseidon himself. He was unpredictable, like the ocean he ruled. This unpredictability extended to his interaction with humans. Sometimes he would help sailors on their voyages, but just as often, he would cause shipwrecks. And in one particularly famous story, he even unleashed a giant squid monster to terrorize the city of Athens because they had neglected to honor him properly. But it wasn't just Poseidon's power or mystery that fascinated the Greeks. They also saw him as a symbol of the awesome beauty of the natural world. In fact, many of the most famous Greek poems and plays were dedicated to him and the other sea gods. For example, Homer's Odyssey is full of references to Poseidon and his power over the sea, and the Theogony, the famous poem that describes the origins of the Greek gods, opens with a hymn to the sea. These stories and myths show us how the Greeks saw the ocean as a place of great adventure and excitement, but also as a source of great danger and fear. It was a place where anything could happen, and where the rules of the everyday world simply didn't apply. For the Greeks, the ocean was a reminder of the awesome power and mystery of the natural world. It was a place where they could experience the full range of human emotions, from the highest highs to the lowest lows. It's no surprise then that they created such vivid and compelling myths about the sea gods and their interactions with humans. Now let's dive into some of these myths and see what they can teach us about the Greek understanding of the ocean. The first myth I want to share with you comes to us from Hesiod's Theogony, one of the most important sources we have for Greek mythology. According to Hesiod, Poseidon was one of the three brothers who shared power over the universe after defeating the Titans. Poseidon's domain was the sea, but he wasn't alone in this domain. He shared it with two other deities, Amphitrite and the Nereis. Amphitrite was the wife of Poseidon and the mother of many of his children. She was usually depicted as a beautiful woman, sometimes riding a dolphin or holding a trident, just like Poseidon. The Nereis, on the other hand, were a group of sea nymphs who were said to live in the Aegean Sea. They were known for their beauty and their ability to lure sailors to their deaths. Now you might be wondering why Poseidon needed to share his domain with these other deities. After all, he was the god of the sea. Wasn't the sea his alone? Well, the answer to that question lies in the nature of power for the Greeks. Power was never absolute. It was always relative. Poseidon may have been the god of the sea, but the sea itself was still subject to the will of the highest god, Zeus. And Zeus, as we all know, was always willing to share power with his brothers and sisters, whether they liked it or not. In fact, one of the main themes of Greek mythology is the constant struggle between the gods for power and dominance. So it's not surprising that even the gods of the sea were not safe from this struggle. In Hesiod's version of the myth, Poseidon and his brothers draw lots to divide up their domains. But even here, there's a sense of competition and rivalry. Poseidon doesn't just want the sea, he wants the best part of the sea. And he's willing to use any means necessary to get it. So what does this tell us about the Greek understanding of the ocean? Well, it shows us that they saw the sea as a source of great power, but also as a source of great conflict. The sea was not just a vast and mysterious realm. It was also a battleground for the gods. Our next myth comes to us from Ovid's Metamorphoses, which is a Latin poem that tells the stories of many Greek myths. In this story, Poseidon is in love with a beautiful mortal woman named Amphitrite. Now, you might remember that Amphitrite is also the name of Poseidon's wife, the sea goddess. But this Amphitrite is a different one. She's a mortal woman who lives in the city of Carthage. Poseidon, of course, is smitten with her beauty, but she's not interested in him at all. She's already promised to marry a handsome young man named Erichthonius. So Poseidon decides to do what any god would do in this situation. He disguises himself as a seahorse and rapes her. Now, if you're thinking, wait a second, didn't Poseidon already have a wife? Well, yes, he did. But as I said before, the Greeks saw the ocean as a realm where the rules of the everyday world simply didn't apply. And one of those rules was monogamy. The gods were allowed to have multiple wives and lovers, both mortal and immortal. In fact, it was often expected of them. It was a way of maintaining order in the universe. If the gods weren't constantly having affairs with each other and with mortals, there would be chaos. There would be no way to keep track of who was related to whom. And without a clear lineage, there could be no true king. In this story, Poseidon isn't just being a jerk, he's actually doing his job. He's creating new gods and heroes through his many affairs. And as we'll see in our next myth, these affairs were not always unwelcome. Sometimes the mortals were happy to have Poseidon's attention. Our next myth is a much happier one. It tells the story of how Poseidon chose Athens as his domain. As I mentioned earlier, Poseidon was one of the three brothers who shared power over the universe. But he wasn't content to rule the seas alone. He wanted more. He wanted to be king of a city too. So he competed with his brother Apollo for the right to become the patron god of Athens. Each brother offered the Athenians a gift. Apollo gave them an olive tree, while Poseidon gave them a saltwater spring. The Athenians, of course, chose the olive tree as their favorite, and so Apollo and Poseidon became the patron gods of Athens. This myth shows us that the Greeks didn't just see the ocean as a source of power and conflict. They also saw it as a source of abundance and prosperity. The sea was full of riches, both literal and figurative, and those who knew how to tap into that abundance could reap the rewards. In this case, the Athenians were the lucky ones. They won the favor of both Poseidon and Apollo and became the beneficiaries of their patronage. But not everyone was so lucky. In our final myth, we meet a sailor named King Minos. One day, while Minos was out sailing, he encountered a terrible storm. The waves were crashing, the wind was howling, and it seemed as though the ship would surely be destroyed. But then suddenly the storm stopped. The waves calmed and the wind died down. Minos and his crew were saved. But it wasn't because Poseidon had taken pity on them. It was because Poseidon had demanded a sacrifice from him. Minos had to give up his most precious possession, his son, to be thrown into the sea. And when Minos refused, Poseidon sent a giant bull monster to ravage his city. This myth shows us that the Greeks were not only in awe of the sea, they were also deeply afraid of it. They knew that the sea could be as generous as it was vengeful, and they respected that power. They knew that the sea had to be appeased, and they were willing to do whatever it took to keep it on their side. In this case, that meant sacrificing their own children. But the Greeks believed that it was a small price to pay for the favor of the gods. Well, that brings us to the end of our journey into the mysteries of the ocean with the Greeks. In the vast world of Greek mythology, one name forever echoes with the sound of crashing waves and the endless roar of the ocean. That name is Poseidon, the mighty god of the sea. His power was as boundless as the waters he commanded, his presence heralded by the churning of the deep and the fury of storms. But there was more to Poseidon than met the eye. Hidden beneath the surface of his imposing figure was a deity of surprising depth, complexity, and contradictions. We've already embarked on an exciting journey into the world of Greek mythology, where we uncovered the secrets of Poseidon, his brother Hades, and the enigmatic realm of the dead that fell under his domain. We also unveiled the mysteries of Zeus, the supreme leader of the Olympian gods, whose powers knew no bounds, much like the sky he so majestically ruled over. Now it's time to dive deeper, not into the literal ocean this time, but into the rich tapestry of myths and legends that surround the enigmatic god Poseidon, the enigmatic god of the seas. Poseidon, god of earthquakes, despots, and horses, was a force to be reckoned with in the ancient Greek pantheon. His strength was such that when he walked, the earth trembled, and when he raised his trident, the very foundations of the world shook. But amidst his terrifying reputation, there existed a vulnerability, a pain that resonated with mortals. He was the god who could grant solace or wreak havoc, depending on how he was perceived. This duality, this capacity for both immense power and deep sorrow, made him all the more fascinating, a mirror to the complexities of the human experience. The origin story of Poseidon is a tale in itself, a narrative that gives us insight into the mindset of the ancient Greeks and their understanding of the world around them. Born to the Titans Cronus and Rhea, Poseidon's early life was anything but ordinary. His birth was foretold to bring great upheaval, a prophecy that led his father to make the fateful decision to swallow him whole. But like his brother Zeus, Poseidon managed to escape his father's relentless pursuit, eventually rising up against the Titans and freeing his imprisoned siblings. The battle between the Titans and the Olympians was epic, a clash of cosmic proportions that reshaped the very structure of the universe. From the depths of this struggle emerged the New World Order, with Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades dividing the cosmos into three distinct domains. Poseidon received the seas, Hades the underworld, and Zeus the skies, setting the stage for their eternal rule. As the god of the sea, Poseidon's influence extended far beyond the watery depths. He was a deity of staggering power, capable of calming the wildest of storms or summoning the deadliest of tempests. A single gesture from him could turn the course of a sailor's fate, sending some to their watery graves and guiding others safely to their harbors. Yet it wasn't just the raw natural forces that Poseidon controlled. He was also the patron of all seafarers, watching over them with an almost paternal gaze. For the ancient Greeks, whose lives were deeply intertwined with the sea, Poseidon was both a savior and a scourge, a benevolent protector and a merciless punisher. This paradoxical nature of his made him a deity who demanded respect and obedience, yet also inspired awe and reverence. Poseidon's temples were grand structures, often built in coastal cities or near harbors, serving as a testament to the reverence he commanded from mortals. But perhaps the most iconic symbol of his worship was the manner in which he was sacrificed. The ancient Greeks believed that Poseidon preferred not to have his blood spilled, instead opting for more symbolic sacrifices. One such practice involved throwing precious metals into the sea, a symbolic offering that mirrored the divine nature of the god himself, as well as demonstrating the wealth and devotion of the worshippers. This unique form of sacrifice not only appeased the god of the sea, but also provided a glimpse into the cultural norms and values of the ancient Greek civilization. It was a way for them to connect with the divine without causing bloodshed, maintaining a balance between their religious duties and their respect for life. His love affairs were legendary, often resulting in unexpected offspring who inherited his aquatic abilities. These weren't just tales of seduction, but narratives that explored themes of temptation, betrayal, and the consequences of divine hubris. Take, for instance, the story of Poseidon and a beautiful mortal woman named Amphitrite. Despite being warned by her father not to accept any suitors, Amphitrite couldn't resist the advances of the sea god. Their union resulted in the birth of Trident, a merman who would become Poseidon's herald, forever linking the realms of the gods and the sea. Such stories were not merely romantic entanglements, but served to underline the pervasiveness of Poseidon's domain, showing how even the boundaries between gods and mortals could be blurred by his affections. One of the most compelling aspects of Poseidon's character is his profound connection with horses. He was considered the patron god of these magnificent creatures, and his love for them was evident in the numerous myths that centered around his interactions with these noble animals. Poseidon's affinity for horses was so strong that he was often depicted riding a magnificent seahorse, symbolizing his dominion over both the oceans and these four-legged wonders. This unusual aspect of his divine persona added another layer to his already complex character, showcasing a gentler, more intimate side of the god of the sea. It also provided the ancient Greeks with a unique avenue for connecting with Poseidon through their shared admiration and respect for horses. The realm of the sea god was not a place of solitude, but rather a vibrant underwater kingdom teeming with mythical creatures. From the playful sea nymphs to the majestic seahorses, each creature had its place in the grand tapestry of Poseidon's domain. He was also credited with creating many of these creatures, each one a testament to his creative power and whimsical nature. These mythical beings weren't just figments of the ancient Greeks' imagination. They served as personifications of the various aspects of the sea, from the gentle currents to the raging storms, reflecting the Greeks' deep connection and respect for the natural world. Poseidon wasn't just a powerful deity, he was a symbol of the mysteries and marvels of the natural world. As the ancient Greeks explored the oceans, encountering new creatures and experiencing the full force of nature's fury, they attributed these wonders to their sea god, further cementing his place in their pantheon. This aspect of Poseidon's legacy highlights the role that mythology played in the ancient world, acting as a framework to understand and interact with the world around them. In the grand tapestry of Greek mythology, Poseidon stands out as a figure of immense power, sorrowful passions, and profound connections. His influence over the seas, his love for horses, and his myriad of offspring all contribute to a portrait of a god whose reach and impact were as vast as the oceans themselves. To truly understand Poseidon is to dive deep into the heart of Greek mythology, where every ripple holds a story and every wave whispers a legend. The ancient Greeks weren't just storytellers, they were observers of the natural world, explorers of the unknown, and seekers of understanding. Their myths weren't just tales, they were attempts to comprehend the forces that shaped their world. And at the center of this world was Poseidon, the god of the sea, a deity whose character and stories mirror the complexities of the human experience. As we conclude our exploration of Poseidon's multifaceted character, we're left with a profound appreciation for the depth of Greek mythology. Each aspect of Poseidon's persona, from his devastating earthquakes to his love for horses, serves as a reminder of the richness and intricacy of this ancient belief system. Studying Poseidon's character allows us to peer into the minds of the ancient Greeks, understanding their fears, their aspirations, and their relationship with the natural world. More than just a powerful sea god, Poseidon embodies the spirit of exploration, the thrill of discovery, and the humbling realization of our place in the vast cosmos. His character challenges us to confront the duality of existence, the coexistence of immense power and deep sorrow, and the delicate balance between order and chaos. In doing so, he invites us to reflect on our own nature, our own relationship with the world around us, and the stories we tell ourselves about the universe and our place within it. As we navigate the complexities of life, may we find inspiration in Poseidon's resilience, wisdom in his adaptability, and courage in his unwavering spirit. Let his story serve as a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope and renewal are always possible. And if you're eager to continue exploring the captivating realm of Greek mythology, I invite you to embark on a thrilling adventure into the depths of the underworld. Click here to dive into the next chapter of our mythological journey. Hello, mortals. I'm here to tell you another story of the Greek ocean. In the beginning, before the Titans fell and the gods rose to power, there were only primordial deities that existed in a world without form or structure. Gaia, the earth, was born first. Then came Uranus, the sky, and together they produced the first generation of elder gods known as the Titans. But the Titans would not be the last, for Gaia and Uranus also created the majestic race of the Atlanteans, immortal beings of colossal proportions who lived in the boundless expanse of the sea. They inhabited the great city of Atlantis, a place where the sun never set, hidden in the watery depths. One day, while still in the dark and formless void, the 5 great brothers of the first rank among the Titans, Cronus castrated his father Uranus with a sickle. An immense wound opened up in the sky, which flowed with ichor, the divine substance that replaced blood among the immortals. And from this wound emerged the giant god, the first of his name, Alcyoneus. Enraged by the mutilation of his father, he immediately attacked Cronus and his 4 brothers, but they were too powerful for him, and he fell in battle. Thus, in his anger, Cronus unleashed the monsters, the first evil things to ever exist. These creatures brought chaos and strife into the world. All the gods and goddesses trembled at their appearance. Even Gaia, the mighty earth, felt fear in her heart. Who could possibly stop these terrible creatures? The answer came from the depths of the sea. The 5 Atlanteans swam to the surface, 5 gods of such grandeur that even the Titans trembled at their sight, and the 5 brothers stood between the monsters and the other gods, giving them time to escape. In the battle that followed, the monsters did not stand a chance. One by one, the Atlanteans struck them down until the earth was clear of the evil creatures. It was then that Gaia gave voice to her eternal gratitude and proclaimed the 5 Atlanteans gods in their own right equal in rank to the Titans. Gods of the sea, of the earth, of the sky, and of all the wonders that lie hidden beneath the waves. And so it was that Poseidon became one of the 3 great brothers who ruled the cosmos. Alongside Zeus, the ruler of the sky, and Hades, the lord of the underworld, Poseidon held dominion over one of the most mysterious and unpredictable realms, the ocean. From the very beginning, Poseidon's nature was closely linked to water. As ruler of the seas, he commanded whales and dolphins, the most intelligent of all sea creatures. And he also controlled earthquakes, storms, floods, droughts, and every other natural disaster that could befall humanity. But Poseidon was not satisfied with merely controlling the elements. He desired more. So he traveled across the world, conquering new lands and peoples, establishing sacred places and sanctuaries in honor of himself, and spreading his worship everywhere. However, Poseidon was not always benevolent towards mortals. If a king or hero disrespected him or refused to build a temple in his honor, then Poseidon would send a monster to ravage the city. For example, when King Minos of Crete failed to sacrifice the mythical white bull that had been sent to him as a sacred animal, Poseidon caused the king's wife to fall in love with the bull and bore a son by it, a monster named Asterius, half man, half bull. This is how the famous labyrinth was born, as well as the Minotaur who lived inside it, terrifying anyone who entered and never came out again. Or when King Aeacus refused to make sacrifices to the god after his fleet returned safe and sound from a voyage, Poseidon raised a great storm that destroyed the entire fleet except for the ship carrying the king. He was forced to wander around the coast in rags until he was finally shipwrecked, and Poseidon turned the survivors into dolphins. The truth is that Poseidon was a capricious god whose moods were as unpredictable as the sea itself. His wrath was terrible, but so was his generosity. He was capable of turning a mortal into stone with just a simple look of his trident. But he could also grant immortality to any human being simply by showing them a flower from the field of asphodel. But we must also remember that Poseidon was not only the god of the seas, but also of earthquakes. And it is well known that an earthquake can destroy a city or bury a person alive. However, Poseidon could also use this power to help someone if he wished. We have proof of this in the story of the Argonauts. When Jason and his companions arrived at the city of Iolcos seeking passage to Colchis, they were pursued by King Aias, who wanted the golden fleece for himself. But Poseidon appeared in a dream to Jason and promised him assistance, and he kept his word. Suddenly the ground split open and swallowed the king's men whole. There are many stories like this one that demonstrate Poseidon's ambiguous character. He was a god of justice, but he could also be unjust. He could punish those who offended him and bless those who pleased him. He was even capable of falling in love with mortals, something that happened with the beautiful Amphitrite, whom he chased through the sea for 7 whole days until she finally agreed to become his wife. Their union symbolized the harmony between the gods and the sea, and their love resulted in the birth of many sea deities such as Trident, the herald of the sea god, and Hippocamp, who taught humans how to ride horses. But not everything was peaceful in Poseidon's kingdom. He wasn't the only god who ventured into the sea. Demeter, the goddess of the harvest, had a daughter named Persephone who one day was gathering flowers on the shore of the lake. Suddenly the earth split open and the god Hades emerged from it to carry her off to the underworld to be his wife. Although Persephone tried to resist, she could not go against the will of the gods. Only her mother's tears could have stopped it, but she only realized what had happened when her daughter was already in hell. So she went to the sun and asked him to hide her in a cave in a faraway land. But the god had already been paid by Hades and refused to disobey him. Then Demeter searched for her daughter on earth, but wherever she went, the crops withered and died, and humanity faced hunger and death. At that moment, Zeus spoke for the first time since the Titanomachy and declared that Hades should return Persephone to her mother. However, Hades was not willing to give up his prize so easily, so he made her swallow 6 pomegranate seeds, the food of the dead. Now, although Persephone had tricked Hades and had only pretended to eat them, the truth is that she could not leave the underworld forever because the seeds had been planted in her stomach and would bear fruit. And thus it was that Persephone had to return to hell every year to fulfill her obligations to her husband, leaving the earth without fertility for 4 months. That is why winter is cold and dry, and the rest of the year the earth is fertile and produces abundant harvests. Poseidon also had a hand in the creation of the famous Trojan horse, one of the greatest weapons of war ever devised. The story goes that Poseidon was on a journey with Athena through the city of Troy when they came across a group of children playing. The god of the seas challenged Athena to see who could come up with the best gift for the Trojans. Athena thought for a moment and then took a branch and carved it until she had created a perfect spear. When Poseidon saw the gift, he knew he could not compete with it, so he decided to play a trick on the Trojans. That same night, Poseidon slipped into the city unnoticed and built a huge wooden horse in the harbor, so big that the Trojans believed it was a gift from the gods. They dragged it all the way into the city, not realizing it was full of Greek soldiers waiting for nightfall to attack. And that is how the city of Troy fell, thanks to the cunning of Poseidon and the wisdom of Athena. It seems that Poseidon was involved in almost everything that happened on Earth, both good and bad. And although he was a god of great power, he was also capable of making mistakes. Sometimes he made bad decisions or acted hastily without thinking about the consequences. But maybe that's what made him so human. He wasn't perfect, but he was real. And that's why he was one of the most important gods in the ancient Greek pantheon. Now it's time to continue our journey through the Greek Ocean and discover new stories about its wonders and mysteries. See you next time, mortals. Until then, may the sea be calm and the winds at your back. He was often portrayed as a strong and commanding figure, his long beard flowing like sea foam, his eyes as deep as the abyss, and always in his hand a great trident that symbolized his otherworldly power. But what if I told you there's more to Poseidon than meets the eye? Welcome back, everyone. Here we explore the strange, scary, and sometimes even silly mysteries of our past. Today we're back with another installment of Poseidon and the mysteries of the Greek Ocean. Remember, if you find this video interesting, hit that like button and subscribe for more videos. Also, be sure to leave your suggestions of topics that we should cover in future videos down below. Let's get started. Poseidon's Fury, Part 2. We left off last time with Poseidon and his brothers Hades and Zeus dividing up their inheritance, the world. Poseidon claimed the seas, Hades took the underworld, and Zeus got the sky. And while it seems as though the division went peacefully enough, it wasn't long before Poseidon had designs on something that Hades had. We talked about this last time, how Poseidon desired the city of Troy, which happened to be near some very important trading routes. This made the city extremely valuable, so much so that King Laomedonte of the region didn't want to give it up. So when Poseidon sent a sea monster to punish him, he refused to stop it. Of course, this meant Poseidon had to step in himself. He came in person and unleashed his wrath upon the Trojans. Some versions say that he flooded the entire city, others that he struck it with earthquakes. Regardless, the Trojans were overwhelmed by the god of the sea. They begged for mercy and finally agreed to give him whatever he wanted. Some versions say that Poseidon demanded the princess, but in others he simply took the horses that Laomedonte was most proud of and rode them across the sea. Either way, the god of the sea had proven his superiority once again. While the story of Laomedonte and the destruction of Troy is tragic, there is a glimmer of hope. The hero Theseus managed to survive the destruction and fled to the nearby city of Mycenae, where he founded a new dynasty that would eventually give rise to Perseus, the man who would slay Medusa, trident of power. One of the many ways that Poseidon is depicted in ancient art is with his trusty trident in hand. The trident, a three-pronged spear, became one of the primary symbols of the god of the sea and is instantly recognizable even today. But did you know that each prong of this weapon had its own special power? According to Hesiod in his Theogony, Poseidon created the earth-shaking trident himself, and from the first prong he made horses spring from the ground and then dive into the sea. From the second prong he made salt. From the third prong he produced vines laden with sweet grapes. While the details may vary between different writers, all agree that each prong had its own magical power. In fact, the trident itself could shake the earth like an earthquake. This is because the trident was given to Poseidon by the Cyclopes. Now, I know what you're thinking. Wait a minute, didn't the Cyclopes make Zeus's lightning bolt? They did. But they also made Poseidon's trident, though they gave it to him later. You see, when Zeus freed the Cyclopes from their imprisonment inside of Gaia, the primordial goddess of the earth, they asked for a gift. And what better gift could there be than the weapons of the gods? And while Zeus ended up getting the lightning bolt, Poseidon ended up getting the trident. But Poseidon's trident wasn't just a gift. It was a symbol of his role as god of the sea. After all, tridents were commonly used by those who worked at sea to keep safe from monsters. It also helped him control the animals of the sea, including the famously unruly horses who would rear up out of the waves during storms. Unlikely parentage. When it comes to children, Poseidon has proven himself to be quite prolific, siring sons and daughters all over Greece, but one of his strangest offspring came from a rather unusual tryst. If you remember back to episode 3, we talked about the origin of the giant Typhon. Now, as I mentioned, Typhon tried to attack Olympus, but Zeus intervened and slew the beast. What happened to its body, you ask? Well, some say it disappeared after the battle. Others say Zeus hurled it into the Caucasus Mountains, where it remained imprisoned until it was freed by Tyche. However, there is yet another tradition that claims that Poseidon took the carcass of the dead monster and impregnated it. As a result, Gaia gave birth to a gigantic serpent named Echidna, who would later mate with her brother Typhon and give rise to more monsters. While other children of Poseidon include heroes like Theseus and Polyphemus, monsters like Scylla and Geryon, and even gods like Triton and Hippocampus. Poseidon's alliances are just as strange, ranging from other gods to heroes to monsters. For example, he teamed up with Helios, the Titan god of the sun, to create the constellation of the Big Dipper, also known as the Great Bear or Ursa Major. He also made an alliance with Gaia, the primordial goddess of the earth, who bore him several children. Most famously, he fathered the Cyclopes and the giants on her, though these weren't exactly love matches, nor were they completely consensual. That's right, Poseidon actually raped Gaia in order to produce the giants, which caused her great pain, especially since she had no way to get rid of them. Not only did she have to carry them inside of her, but once they were born, she had to hide them from Zeus, who would obviously not be too happy about the prospect of his siblings being raised by their grandfather Uranus. Eventually, the Cyclopes made it to the assembly of the gods where they were recognized, but not for their hard work. Instead, they were thrown into Tartarus, never to be seen again. Meanwhile, the giants were allowed to roam freely around the earth, causing them to grow to gigantic sizes. Eventually, Zeus decided that enough was enough and declared war on them, killing them all in battle. Still, Poseidon's relationship with Gaia shows just how unpredictable his behavior can be. Oceanic creatures. As god of the sea, Poseidon is often depicted with creatures that dwell beneath the waves. Horses are probably the most common animal associated with him, thanks to his ability to create them at will with his trident. However, there's another creature that is just as closely linked to the god of the sea, the dolphin. Dolphins are frequently found swimming alongside Poseidon in ancient art, but this isn't simply a case of having a favorite animal. Instead, it reflects the god's connection to the world of the dead. Like dolphins, souls were believed to be able to travel between worlds, making them natural guides for the newly departed. However, unlike dolphins, souls were often accompanied by the three-headed dog Cerberus, whose presence ensured that the deceased stayed put and didn't cause any trouble. Speaking of pesky dead people, let's move on to one of Poseidon's most famous temples located in Athens, the Kekrops. This temple was dedicated to Kekrops, an ancient king of Athens who was said to have been the son of Poseidon and Gaia. However, there is some debate over whether he was a god or just an ordinary man. After all, he is credited with introducing the Athenians to sacred law and customs, as well as teaching them agriculture and how to work with metals. But then again, he is also said to have fought against the giants during the Gigantomachy and assisted the Argonauts in their quest for the Golden Fleece. Perhaps he was a demigod, then like Heracles or Achilles. Regardless of his true parentage, Cecrops is a key figure in Athenian mythology, and his temple was one of the most important religious sites in the city. What do you think of Poseidon's strange and varied history? Do you think he was a good god or a bad one? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and don't forget to check back for more videos. Until then, remember to stay safe out there, everyone. Poseidon was not just a god of the seas, but also of earthquakes, storms, and floods. In Homer's Odyssey, it is said that with a single strike of his trident, he could shatter cliffs, summon tidal waves, or shake the very earth beneath one's feet. So what exactly was his trident, and why did Poseidon carry it? The mysteries of the ocean have always captivated mankind. From the ancient Greeks to the modern day, we've been fascinated by what lies beneath the waves. And it's no wonder when you consider that over 70% of our planet is covered in water. There's just so much we don't know about the ocean that it's easy to get lost in all of the possibilities. What kind of creatures might be lurking in the depths? What secrets does the ocean hold? And how did the ancient Greeks come up with their pantheon of sea gods and monsters? Poseidon was the god of the seas, earthquakes, storms, and floods. He was the brother of Zeus and Hades, and he was also the father of many famous figures from Greek mythology, including Medusa, the Gorgon, and Perseus, the hero who slew her. Poseidon was often depicted as a handsome young man with a beard and a crown of coral. He was usually shown carrying a trident, a three-pronged spear that he used as both a weapon and a tool. As a weapon, the trident was incredibly powerful. It could shatter cliffs, summon tidal waves, and shake the very earth beneath one's feet. But it could also be used to calm the seas and part the waters, allowing ships to pass safely. When it comes to understanding the power of Poseidon, it's important to remember that the ancient Greeks didn't have a scientific understanding of the natural world. They believed that the weather and the natural world were controlled by the whims of the gods. Poseidon's trident was a symbol of this belief. It represented the awesome power of nature and the futility of trying to control it. For the ancient Greeks, the ocean was a dangerous and unpredictable place. Storms could easily sink a ship, and there were all sorts of sea monsters lurking in the depths. Poseidon's trident was a reminder of the dangers of the sea and the importance of respecting the gods. Mariners would often make offerings to Poseidon before setting sail in order to ensure a safe journey. But Poseidon's trident wasn't just a symbol of fear, it was also a source of fascination for the ancient Greeks. After all, it was a tool that allowed Poseidon to do things that mere mortals could only dream of. He could summon giant squid to battle his enemies or use his trident to turn seawater into wine. Poseidon's trident was a reminder of the limitless power of the gods and the wonders that they were capable of. The myths about Poseidon's trident are some of the most exciting and dramatic stories in all of Greek mythology. From his battle with the titan Oceanus to his confrontation with the monster Scylla, Poseidon's trident was always up to some incredible feats. These stories were not only entertaining, but they also served to teach the ancient Greeks about the world around them. For example, the story of Poseidon and the monster Scylla may have helped to explain the destructive power of whirlpools. The ancient Greeks knew that whirlpools were dangerous, and they believed that they were caused by the breath of Poseidon. This belief was later confirmed by science, as we now know that whirlpools are caused by the same forces of nature that Poseidon was said to control. In today's video, we will explore the mysteries of Poseidon's trident. We will examine the various myths and legends that surround this powerful weapon and try to gain a better understanding of its significance. Join us as we uncover the secrets of Poseidon's trident. The first thing you should know about Poseidon's trident is that it was no ordinary weapon. It was a magical tool that gave Poseidon powers beyond those of any other god. With a single strike, he could shatter cliffs, summon tidal waves, or shake the very earth beneath one's feet. This power made him a formidable opponent in battle and also gave him control over the natural world. The ancient Greeks believed that earthquakes were caused by Poseidon's anger, and they were right. Earthquakes are caused by the movement of tectonic plates, which can cause the earth to tremble and shake. Another interesting fact about Poseidon's trident is that it was never depicted in art with all three tines pointing upwards. The central tine was always pointing downwards, while the two side tines pointed towards the sky. This may seem like a small detail, but it actually has a deeper meaning. The central tine represents Poseidon's power over the earth, while the two side tines represent his power over the heavens. Together, these three tines represent Poseidon's total power as god of the seas. Poseidon's trident was also a symbol of his wisdom and his ability to navigate the oceans. The three tines represent the three parts of the sea: the surface, the middle, and the bottom. Poseidon's knowledge of these three parts of the sea allowed him to navigate them with ease and protect those who sailed them. Now let's take a look at some of the most famous myths and legends involving Poseidon's trident. In Hesiod's Theogony, we read that Poseidon fought a fierce battle against the titan Oceanus during the war between the gods and the titans. Poseidon's trident was instrumental in his victory, as it allowed him to control the seas and prevent the titans from escaping. Another famous myth involving Poseidon's trident can be found in Homer's Odyssey. When Odysseus and his men arrived on the island of the Cyclops, they were trapped inside a cave by a giant boulder. Poseidon, who was angry at Odysseus for blinding his son Polyphemus, refused to help. However, when Odysseus' friend, the sorceress Circe, begged Poseidon to change his mind, he agreed to move the boulder. He used his trident to shake the earth and split the rock in two, allowing Odysseus and his men to escape. Poseidon's trident was also used to defeat the monster Scylla. According to Homeric hymn number 4, Poseidon created Scylla as punishment for a mortal woman who had rejected his advances. She was a terrifying creature with 6 heads and 12 feet, and she lived on a rock near the strait that connected the Aegean and Ionian seas. Her heads were constantly spraying poisonous water, which killed anyone who drank it. This was a major hazard for sailors, and many ships were lost to Scylla's deadly breath. Poseidon eventually grew tired of Scylla's destructive behavior and sent a giant squid to kill her. Using his trident, Poseidon guided the squid's tentacles and struck Scylla's heads one by one until she was dead. The last thing you should know about Poseidon's trident is that it was a symbol of his wisdom and his ability to navigate the oceans. The three tines represent the three parts of the sea: the surface, the middle, and the bottom. Poseidon's knowledge of these three parts of the sea allowed him to navigate them with ease and protect those who sailed them. Mariners would often make offerings to Poseidon before setting sail in order to ensure a safe journey. They knew that the sea was a dangerous and unpredictable place, and they respected the power of Poseidon's trident. Poseidon's trident is a fascinating weapon, and one that has captured the imagination of people for centuries. Its power and versatility are truly amazing, and it's no wonder that Poseidon was such a feared and respected god. If you enjoyed learning about Poseidon's trident, be sure to check out our other videos on Greek mythology. We have an entire series devoted to the subject. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. If you enjoy our content, please subscribe and become part of our community. And if you really want to support us, you can join our membership program and get exclusive perks like early access to videos, behind the scenes content, and direct access to our team. So what are you waiting for? Join us today and let's explore the world of Greek mythology together. But the trident was not only for destruction. With a gentle motion, Poseidon could calm the seas, smooth the waves, and bless sailors with safe passage across dangerous waters. He could also shake the earth, causing earthquakes, creating new islands and reshaping the terrain of the seafloor. And he wasn't just a god of water. He controlled all fresh water too. So if there was a drought, it was Poseidon who decided how long crops would go without rain, how parched the earth would become, and when to send the first refreshing drops from the sky. Some say his power over nature made him unpredictable. Storms could arise unexpectedly, turning calm seas into raging waves that swallowed ships whole. Earthquakes could strike without warning, collapsing buildings and ending lives. Drought could linger or end abruptly, leaving humans to wonder about the whims of their divine ruler. But maybe these weren't whims at all. Maybe Poseidon wasn't as arbitrary as people thought. Maybe there was a method to his madness, a reason behind every flood, earthquake, and drought. Let me explain. You see, Poseidon had a big problem. It wasn't enough that he ruled the oceans, freshwater, and the earth's tremors. No, he also had to deal with the monsters that lurked beneath the waves. Now, some folks might think monsters in the ocean sounds like a fishy tale, but back in the ancient world, fishermen were pulling up creatures that defied explanation. Fish with lions' heads, horses with seaweed manes, and beasts with so many eyes they couldn't possibly count them. All kinds of weird stuff that makes today's weirdest YouTube videos look tame by comparison. Poseidon needed someone to keep these monsters in check, and that's where the Cyclopes came in. These guys were a pain in the butt, always getting into mischief and stirring up trouble for sailors. The Cyclopes weren't strong enough to create storms or trigger earthquakes, but they could sure cause some havoc on their own. They could overturn boats, tangle fishing nets, and even drag ships to the bottom of the ocean. And that's why Poseidon created the Oracle of Delphi. This was no ordinary seer. Oh no, the Oracle of Delphi was special. She could talk to the gods, get their inside scoop on what was going on in the universe, and then share their messages with mortals. And guess who she got her tips from? Yep, Poseidon himself. He told her about the monsters in the sea, the threats they posed to humans, and how important it was to keep an eye on them. Now, you might be thinking, why didn't Poseidon just handle the monsters himself? Well, he did sometimes, but there were so many monsters in the ocean, he needed backup. That's where the Oracle of Delphi came in. When the Cyclopes got too rowdy or a new monster popped up to terrorize sailors, the Oracle of Delphi would tell the heroes who were brave enough to listen what they needed to do to stop it. Sometimes it took battling a multi-headed dog to retrieve a magical ball from the bottom of the sea, or taming a giant squid with 6 long necks to free a sailor it had captured. Each adventure was unique, but the Oracle of Delphi always knew what needed to be done. But let's face it, dealing with monsters is only part of the story. What really makes Poseidon tick? Why does he shake the earth, flood coastal cities, and send ships to the bottom of the sea? Well, let me tell you, it's not just about being a grumpy god who enjoys messing with humans. You see, Poseidon had a bigger purpose in mind. Sure, he wanted to keep the monsters in check and make sure sailors respected the power of the sea. But he also had a deeper goal. He wanted to keep the balance of nature. You see, back in the ancient world, people didn't understand things like plate tectonics or the water cycle. They didn't know that the earth was made of giant puzzle pieces that shifted and cracked over time. Nor did they know that water evaporates and returns as rain. Instead, they thought the world was static, unchanging, and unbreakable. But Poseidon knew better. He saw the land rising and falling, felt the heat from the earth's core, and witnessed the endless cycle of water from snow to rain to rivers to sea. He understood that nature was always changing, always evolving, and he took it upon himself to guide that process. That's why he shook the earth, to nudge those giant puzzle pieces into new positions. That's why he flooded coastal cities, to clear away old buildings and make room for new ones. And that's why he sent ships to the bottom of the sea, to create coral reefs and underwater ecosystems that would thrive for generations. To the ancient Greeks, it all looked like random bad luck. Their homes were destroyed, their boats were overturned, their crops withered in the fields. But Poseidon wasn't being arbitrary. He was taking care of business, making sure the world stayed in balance. Some people thought he was a god of chaos, but in reality, he was the god of change, the catalyst that pushed the world forward. Of course, humans didn't understand any of this back then. They blamed Poseidon for their problems and tried to appease him with temples and sacrifices. But in the end, it didn't matter because Poseidon wasn't interested in their worship. He didn't need their prayers or offerings because he had something far more valuable, the respect and fear of his fellow gods. Poseidon was one of the most powerful deities in the entire Greek pantheon. He wasn't just the god of the sea, fresh water, and earthquakes. He was also the brother of Zeus and Hades, the ruler of the Titans and the lord of the dead. And let's not forget his iconic weapon, the trident. It wasn't just a fancy spear, it was a tool of creation and destruction. With a gentle motion, Poseidon could calm the seas, smooth the waves, and bless sailors with safe passage across dangerous waters. He could also shake the earth, causing earthquakes, creating new islands, and reshaping the terrain of the seafloor. And he wasn't just a god of water, he controlled all fresh water too. So if there was a drought, it was Poseidon who decided how long crops would go without rain, how parched the earth would become, and when to send the first refreshing drops from the sky. Some say his power over nature made him unpredictable. Storms could arise unexpectedly, turning calm seas into raging waves that swallowed ships whole. Earthquakes could strike without warning, collapsing buildings and ending lives. Drought could linger or end abruptly, leaving humans to wonder about the whims of their divine ruler. But maybe these weren't whims at all. Maybe Poseidon wasn't as arbitrary as people thought. Maybe there was a method to his madness, a reason behind every flood, earthquake, and drought. And let's not forget his many temples scattered across the ancient world. There was the Temple of Poseidon at Cape Sunion, perched on a cliff overlooking the Aegean Sea. And the Temple of Poseidon at Tyrannus, dedicated to his power over horses. And the Temple of Poseidon at Corinth, built on the isthmus that connected the Peloponnese to the rest of Greece. Each temple was a testament to Poseidon's power, a symbol of his presence in the everyday lives of the ancient Greeks. He was a complex, contradictory figure, feared and revered, destructive and creative, wild and unpredictable. And yet somehow, despite all his flaws, he was also a god to be respected, a force of nature to be reckoned with, a reminder of the awesome power of the sea and the earth. But for now, we've reached the end of our journey into the mysteries of the Greek ocean. The deep sea is home to some of the scariest things known to humankind, like the angler fish, which has teeth so big they have to be seen to be believed. But what about the surface of the ocean? The ancient Greeks knew that there were dangers there too, because while the Mediterranean was an inland sea, it was still connected to the vast and unpredictable Atlantic. They called it the River Oceanus. It flowed around the whole earth, carrying with it all manner of wonders and perils. And the god who controlled it was far from placid. To the Greeks, this duality, fury and calm, storm and peace, was the very nature of Poseidon himself. He was unpredictable, like the ocean he ruled. But exactly how much danger did Poseidon bring to sailors? Was he a friend or foe? Let's find out in today's episode of Fake Tank Thursday. We know that the ancient Greeks loved nothing more than to take a good myth and adapt it for the stage. In fact, the most famous playwright of classical Athens made a career out of it. That's right, we're talking about Euripides. He was super into reworking old myths into new tragedies. Take, for instance, the story of Medusa. Her head was chopped off by Perseus, right? But before she died, she predicted that her killer would also meet a violent end at the hands of his own family. Now, Euripides took that base myth and ran with it, exploring what might happen if one of Perseus's descendants was tempted to kill his own son. This is the plot of his play, The Children of Heracles. Of course, it doesn't end well for anyone involved, but that's not important for today. What matters is that Euripides changed the ending just slightly. Instead of dying at the hands of his son, Perseus survives. but he becomes blinded in the scuffle and he wanders off into the sea where he drowns. Now, in Euripides' version, this part doesn't happen because of Poseidon, but in other tellings of the Perseus myth, Poseidon is the one who causes the hero's downfall. You see, when Perseus set out to slay Medusa, he stole Poseidon's sacred trident and used this magic to get away. Poseidon got pretty pissed about this, and after Perseus killed Medusa, he sent a giant squid monster to drag him under the sea and crush him. Only after 5 days did Zeus remember that Poseidon had made a bet with his brother Hades that neither of them would help Perseus, and Zeus was forced to step in and save the hero's life. But these myths don't only feature Poseidon as a vengeful bully. He could also be a furious father. In Homeric hymn number 3 to Aphrodite, the goddess is having an affair with the mortal Anchises. But when Anchises boasts about his beauty to the other Olympians, Poseidon gets mad that someone would dare compare themselves to the gods and punishes Anchises by turning him into a donkey. But fear not though, because Zeus totally has his back. He rapes her anyway, so it all works out. But my favorite telling of Poseidon's wrath is from Plutarch's essay on anger. He tells a story about a king named Cyrus the Great who ruled over Lydia in the 7th century BC. Cyrus was a bit of a dick, so Poseidon decided to humble him. While he was praying in the temple of Poseidon, God flooded the temple and killed him. Now, if you've been listening to this series, you probably already know that Poseidon didn't always respond to prayers with violence. Sometimes he answered them literally. In Greek religion, Poseidon wasn't just the god of earthquakes, storms, and floods. He was also the patron deity of travelers and anyone who worked on or around water, including sailors, fishermen, and swimmers. And since most of the ancient Greeks lived near the coast or depended on the sea to bring them food, Poseidon was actually a really important deity. There were sanctuaries to him all over Greece, and every city on the Aegean had a festival dedicated to him, complete with athletic competitions and sacrifices. These festivals happened at least once a year, but sometimes twice, because Poseidon needed to be appeased both in the spring, when ships set sail for the summer, and again in the fall, when they came home. So how does that square with Poseidon's terrifying reputation? Well, the answer, as it so often is balance. Like all the best Greek gods, Poseidon had a dual nature. He could be both dangerous and helpful, vengeful and benevolent, and people knew that the way he responded depended on how he was approached. If sailors gave him gifts and honored him properly, he would protect their journey, but those who angered him or refused to sacrifice to him had better watch their backs. And there are plenty of myths to illustrate this point. Once upon a time, King Minos of Crete wanted to sacrifice a bull to Poseidon. But as the beast was being led to the altar, it leapt over the altar and swam away. Poseidon was furious, so he caused Minos' son Asterion to fall madly in love with the bull. Now, depending on the version, either Asterion tried to catch the bull and fell into a crevice, or he built a labyrinth to contain it. Either way, this structure became a prison for another creature, the Minotaur. But Poseidon's wrath could extend beyond mere mortals. Even the other gods feared him. During the Gigantomachy, the war between the giants and the gods, Alcyoneus fought against Heracles. Now, Alcyoneus was a pretty tough cookie. He had regenerative powers which made him almost immortal, and Heracles couldn't beat him until Poseidon intervened. According to Pseudo-Apollodorus, the god struck Alcyoneus with his trident, which broke his immortality. Then Heracles shot him with a poisoned arrow, killing him. But what did Poseidon have to gain by helping Heracles in this fight? Well, there's no way of knowing for sure because there are so many versions of the myths, but let's ask ourselves a question. How do we know that Poseidon even existed? We don't. But historians can study the evidence left behind by the ancient Greeks and draw educated conclusions about what their beliefs might have been. And one thing is pretty clear. They thought that Poseidon could strike at any moment, sending earthquakes and tsunamis crashing into the Greek world and destroying everything in their path. In the Archaic period before the rise of Athens, there were 3 major sanctuaries to Poseidon: Delphi, Olympia, and Isthmia. Each was located near the sea, and each experienced regular earthquakes. The ancient Greeks naturally assumed that Poseidon was responsible for these rumblings in the earth, and they built temples in these places to placate him. But as time went on and scientific thought developed, people began to realize that earthquakes weren't divine in origin. Earthquakes were still frightening, but they no longer seemed like the result of a capricious god. This idea is explored in Plato's dialogue called Theaetetus. Socrates asked the philosopher Theaetetus if an earthquake is caused by something inside or outside the earth. Theaetetus says inside, and Socrates replies that if that's true, then it must be eternal. But we know earthquakes don't happen forever. After that, Theaetetus admits that he doesn't really know, and Socrates takes the opportunity to suggest that maybe the earth is hollow and surrounded by water. Sound familiar? It's uncanny how close Plato's theory is to our own modern understanding of tectonic plates and the Atlantic Ocean. But let's not forget that this is a work of philosophy, not science. Plato isn't just theorizing about the composition of the earth. He's also trying to explain why earthquakes happen and why they seem to be centered around specific sanctuaries. His conclusion is that earthquakes are a physical reaction to moral corruption, and the closer people get to virtue, the less shaky the ground beneath their feet will be. This is kind of a bummer, but it's worth remembering that Greek philosophy wasn't just about abstract thought. It had very real applications for the people who practiced it. If you were living in ancient Athens and an earthquake shook your city, you'd probably think that Poseidon was mad at you for something. But by the time of Plato's writing, people were starting to think about other possibilities. This is the kind of intellectual development that can happen when people feel safe enough to explore the world around them. And it's hard to imagine ancient Greece without Poseidon, the god who personified the dualities of the sea, the destructive power and the life-giving bounty, the untamed wilderness and the potential for exploration, the awesome beauty and the lurking danger. Thanks for watching. Bye. Now listen closely, for I'm about to reveal a secret so profound it could either save your life or cost you everything. Do you remember when I spoke about Poseidon, the mighty god of the seas? Well, his influence over the oceans ran deeper than even the greatest sailors realized. There was more to the ocean's wrath and its calm than they ever understood. And some fishermen and sailors discovered this the hard way, learning of the terrible price of Poseidon's favor and the terrible fate that awaited those who crossed him. Welcome back, my dear viewers, to another episode of Greek Mythology. Today, we'll be delving deep into the heart of the mystery surrounding Poseidon and exploring the harrowing tales of those who dared to challenge the might of the sea god. If you're not new here, then welcome back. It's always wonderful to see familiar faces eager to dive into the world of ancient mythology. Now, let's dive in. Sailors and fishermen often prayed to him before leaving the shore. Offerings of wine, animals, or even precious goods were cast into the water in hopes of gaining his favor. But Poseidon was a god of moods and whims, and sometimes even these appeasement rituals did little to prevent disaster from striking. The sea could turn from placid to tempestuous in an instant, and ships that had sailed under the god's favor could just as quickly find themselves tossed about in the fury of a storm. One such tale is told of a young fisherman named Aristomachus. Despite his youth, Aristomachus was renowned throughout his coastal town for his skill at fishing. He possessed a small but sturdy boat and was considered the most successful fisherman in the community. His catch was always plentiful, ensuring that he and his family never went hungry and that they could also sell their surplus fish to the townspeople. However, as time passed, Aristomachus grew increasingly greedy. He wanted more than just enough food for his family and his community. He desired wealth beyond measure, convinced that only the gods could provide it. Driven by this desire, he decided to make an offering to Poseidon, hoping for a reward that would change his life. On one fateful day, as the sun glistened off the surface of the calm sea, Aristomachus set out into the water with a heavy chest filled with gold coins. He intended to toss this treasure into the sea as an offering to Poseidon. As his boat reached the center of the ocean, Aristomachus took a deep breath, lifted the chest, and flung it into the waves. The chest disappeared beneath the surface, taking with it his hopes for untold riches. At that moment, the sky darkened, and within seconds, strong winds began whipping across the water, turning it from a placid mirror to a raging beast. Waves crashed against his small boat, threatening to swallow him and his dream. Fear clutched at Aristomachus's heart, and he realized the gravity of his actions. In his greed, he had angered Poseidon, and now the full force of the sea god's power was crashing down upon him. Fighting against the relentless waves, Aristomachus desperately tried to navigate back to the shore, his small boat a mere speck amidst the vast turmoil he had unleashed. but the further he tried to go, the stronger the current seemed to become, as if Poseidon himself was testing his resolve. Finally, exhausted and defeated, Aristomachus was forced to surrender to the raging sea. The once proud fisherman and his small boat were swallowed by the angry waters, leaving behind not a trace of their struggle. But why did Poseidon react so violently? What was the fisherman's ultimate fate? And what do his actions reveal about the true nature of the sea god? Was this merely an act of divine retribution? Or was there more to the story? These questions echo through the ages, reminding us of the fragility of man in the face of nature's raw power and the enigmatic wrath of the gods. In the next tale, we encounter a hero who doesn't fall prey to the whims of Poseidon, yet still faces the consequences of the sea god's volatile nature. It was during the Trojan War that the Greek hero Diomedes distinguished himself through acts of valor and bravery. However, his hubris grew with each victory, leading him to believe that he was invincible. This belief reached its peak when he offended Poseidon, causing the god to curse him and rendering him invulnerable with his rear end. Despite being cursed, Diomedes continued to fight, committing even greater atrocities, slaying Trojans and even assaulting the goddess Aphrodite. However, after each kill, the pain intensified, driving him closer to death. Realizing that his invincibility had transformed into a fatal flaw, Diomedes finally succumbed, collapsing on the battlefield. But this is where the tale takes a surprising turn. As he lay dying, Athena appeared before him, revealing the truth behind his suffering. She explained that Poseidon was furious because he had struck and wounded his son Polyphemus during the war. As punishment, the god had made Diomedes invulnerable except for his rear end, which remained his mortal point. Wounded in battle, Diomedes had been unable to sit, causing him immense pain. Athena offered him an opportunity to break the curse by finding the rear end of Polyphemus, Poseidon's son, and offering it as a sacrifice. Despite the grim task before him, Diomedes agreed. After much searching, he finally located Polyphemus's rear end and performed the necessary sacrifice. Immediately, the pain vanished, and Diomedes found himself once again vulnerable but free from torment. He returned home, forever changed by his experience and bearing the scars of his hubris. In this tale, we see a different side of Poseidon's wrath, a wrath that is not solely destructive, but also punitive, seeking justice for his son and upholding the balance of the cosmos. It also serves as a reminder of the importance of humility and respect towards the gods, a lesson that many mortals, including the mighty heroes of Greek mythology, were all too eager to learn. The stories of Aristomachus and Diomedes serve to deepen our understanding of Poseidon's character and his role in the ancient Greek world. They show how his power over the seas was absolute and how his moods could shift from calm acceptance to violent anger in an instant. While both men acted with the best of intentions, their outcomes serve as cautionary tales, reminding us that even the mightiest of heroes and the most skilled of craftsmen can fall victim to the unpredictable whims of the gods. Poseidon's character in these myths is not merely that of a powerful deity, but also of a god of justice. His wrath is not unprovoked, but often a response to disrespect or a challenge to the natural order. The fisherman's disregard for the sea and Diomedes' arrogance in the face of divine power both lead to their downfall. Yet these tales also offer a glimmer of hope. Through sacrifice and humility, one can appease the gods and find redemption even in the darkest of times. I hope you found these myths as fascinating as I did, and may they serve as a reminder of the importance of respecting the power of nature and the unpredictability of the divine. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support means the world to me. Also, feel free to leave your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. I always love hearing from you. And if there are any other myths or legends you'd like me to cover, just let me know. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the world of Greek mythology. In our last episode, we dove deep into the mystery surrounding Poseidon, god of the sea, earthquakes, and horses. We explored his many hidden realms, including the mysterious island of Atlantis. But now it's time to surface and reveal a truth that could change everything. Poseidon may have had a brother who ruled over the very stars in the sky. His name was Atlas. And when he fell from Olympus, he was cursed to hold up the heavens forever. Wait, what? Now the story of Atlas is one filled with deceit, betrayal, and a heavy dose of celestial mechanics. Join me as I attempt to shed some light on this shadowy figure and unveil the secrets behind his eternal punishment. And remember, just like the great Poseidon, there are hidden depths to this tale that most people just gloss over. So pay attention to every word, because I'm about to take you on a journey through time and space, a journey that will leave you starstruck. But before we dive into the depths of Atlas's tragic fate, let's take a moment to appreciate the brilliance of ancient Greece, the birthplace of democracy, philosophy, and some pretty epic poetry. It was a place where the gods walked among mortals, where the very air crackled with divine energy. But it wasn't just the birthplace of Western civilization. It was also the home of some truly fascinating creatures. Take the centaurs, for example. Half human, half horse beings who roamed the forests and mountains. They were known for their wild parties, which often ended in tragedy. Or the satyrs, the goat-legged companions of Dionysus, the god of wine. These guys were always up to no good, getting drunk, causing mischief, and generally making a mess wherever they went. Then there were the Gorgons, three sisters with terrifying faces and snaky hair. They were said to live on the edge of the world, far from the prying eyes of mortals. But if you were brave enough to seek them out, they could grant you eternal youth and beauty. And let's not forget the sirens, half bird, half woman, creatures who lured sailors to their deaths with their enchanting songs. These are just a few of the amazing creatures that populated the world of Greek mythology, each one more fascinating than the last. But what really captured my attention was the Cyclopes, one-eyed giants who were known for their immense strength and skill as craftsmen. They were a bit rough around the edges, let's say, but they had a certain charm to them, and I couldn't help but wonder, could they be more than just hulking brutes? You see, the Greeks believed that the Cyclopes were actually the descendants of Uranus, the sky god, and Gaia, the earth goddess. They were born from the primordial ooze that covered the earth before it was formed. And they were incredibly powerful, so much so that even Zeus, king of the gods, was afraid of them. As I dug deeper into their lore, I discovered that the Cyclopes weren't just strong and skilled, they were also highly intelligent. They were master craftsmen, creating all kinds of amazing things out of stone and metal. But perhaps their greatest achievement was the construction of the labyrinth on the island of Crete. This was no ordinary maze. It was a complex structure designed to hold the Minotaur, a creature with the head of a bull and the body of a man. The labyrinth was so confusing that once you entered, you could never escape. And it was guarded by a fearsome beast, the Minotaur, who fed on the flesh of those who stumbled into its lair. Now, you might be wondering why the Greeks went to such lengths to contain the Minotaur. And the answer, my friends, lies in the bloodline of this terrifying creature. You see, the Minotaur was a son of Poseidon and a human woman named Pasiphae. And as you might have guessed, Pasiphae was married to King Minos of Crete. He was quite the ladies' man, that Minos. And his love affairs didn't always end well. For example, he once kidnapped a beautiful woman named Europa, who was the daughter of the Phoenician king. She was just minding her own business one day when Minos came along and swept her off her feet. He took her back to Crete and made her his queen. But Europa missed her home and her family, and she never forgave Minos for what he did to her. Then there was the incident with the white bull. See, Poseidon was a jealous god, and he got really pissed when Minos didn't sacrifice the bull as promised. So Poseidon sent a giant to Crete, and you won't believe what happened next. Oh yeah. Let's talk about the gifts, the gods, and the bargains. Poseidon, god of the sea, earthquakes, and horses, made an offer to the Athenians. He would give them a gift that would bring them everlasting prosperity. But Athena, his wise and wily sister, had something else in mind. By contrast, she offered the olive tree, a symbol of peace, nourishment, and enduring prosperity. The people chose her gift, and so the city was named Athens. Now, you might be wondering what this has to do with the Cyclopes. Well, it turns out that Athena was also the patron deity of the Cyclopes. She helped them develop their skills as craftsmen, and they in turn helped her build her temples and other structures. In fact, one of the Cyclopes named Brontes was responsible for crafting Thor's mighty hammer, Mjolnir. Now that's a pretty impressive feat, but the Cyclopes weren't just artisans, they were also warriors, and they played a key role in the Trojan War. You might remember that Polyphemus, the Cyclops who befriended Odysseus, was killed by the hero Achilles during the war. But there was another Cyclops who fought alongside the Trojans, and his name was Thoas. He was a giant with tremendous strength, and he fought bravely for his side. But in the end, the Greeks won the war, and the Cyclopes were once again on the losing side. After the war, the Cyclopes retreated to their island fortress, and they lived there in peace for many years. But their luck would eventually run out, and they would be dragged into the next great conflict between the gods. Now, I know you're probably eager to hear about the fall of Atlantis, but we can't talk about that yet. We need to explore some of the lesser known aspects of Poseidon's power and influence. Take, for example, his ability to control the weather. He could summon storms that would shake the very foundations of the earth. Or he could calm the seas so that ships could sail safely across the ocean. But he wasn't just a force of nature. He was also a cunning strategist, able to outmaneuver his enemies and achieve his goals with little effort. One of the most famous examples of Poseidon's strategic genius was his confrontation with the giant Typhon. This was no ordinary monster. Typhon was the father of all monsters, and he was so powerful that even the gods were afraid of him. When Typhon attacked the Olympians, Poseidon knew that brute force wouldn't be enough to defeat him. So he came up with a clever plan. He pretended to be scared and led Typhon away from the other gods. Then, when he was far enough away, Poseidon unleashed his full power and struck Typhon with a trident. The giant roared in pain and collapsed to the ground, defeated. But Poseidon's abilities didn't stop there. He was also a master of disguise, able to shapeshift into all kinds of animals. He used this ability to great effect, often appearing to humans in the form of a horse or dolphin to trick them or test their character. Now, I'm sure you've heard the story of Medusa, the Gorgon whose gaze could turn men to stone. But did you know that Poseidon had a hand in her transformation? You see, Medusa was originally a beautiful woman, but she was cursed by Athena, and that curse turned her into the most hideous creature in the world. But Medusa wasn't the only one to suffer at the hands of the gods. There was also the story of the Theban hero Semele, who was the mother of Dionysus. When Zeus visited her in his true form, she was so overwhelmed by his power that she died. But Zeus saved their unborn son and brought him up on Olympus, where he became the god of wine and revelry. Hey, don't hate! You know, sometimes the gods could be pretty rough around the edges, but they also had a sense of humor. A twisted sense of humor, that is. Just think about the time Poseidon turned a man into a donkey because he was thirsty, or when he unleashed a flood to punish the city of Troy. But they weren't the only ones who had a taste for the dramatic. The Titans were also known for their love of partying. And boy, did they throw some epic bashes. They loved nothing more than getting together, drinking wine, dancing, and making merry. But their good times didn't last forever. The Titans were eventually overthrown by the gods, and they were banished to the depths of Tartarus, the underworld. So buckle up, because we're about to take a wild ride through the darkest corners of the Greek underworld. You won't believe what secrets lie within. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Until next time, keep exploring the mysteries of the ancient world and stay curious. Though defeated, Poseidon remained a figure of awe. His spring and his power continued to remind the Athenians of the god they had not chosen. But there were other parts of Greece where Poseidon was still all-powerful. Welcome back to Poseidon and the mysteries of the Greek ocean. Last time we saw how the Athenians won the favor of Poseidon over the other gods and took control of Attica's bountiful resources. The other gods weren't too happy about this, but they knew better than to start a war with Athens. However, one god was seething over his loss, none other than Poseidon himself. The god of the sea had suffered defeat at the hands of mortals. He could never forget this humiliation, and so he withdrew to his underwater palace, vowing revenge upon Athens. We can see an example of this anger in Homeric hymn number 3 to Poseidon. There it says, "I will make your city a wide and rich and famous one. You shall have long walls and ships by hundreds, and your young men shall be like the stars in heaven for their sheer numbers. All decked out in bronze helmets, and all armed with shining spears and bows, with quivers at their backs slung on either shoulder, and the shafts will fly like falling stars down through the ranks of your enemies." Now this sounds like a threat to me. Poseidon is threatening that just because the Athenians have bested him once doesn't mean they've bested him forever. In fact, he will use his powers to make Athens into a naval powerhouse, and then he will destroy them. And indeed, in the Archaic period, Athens did become a great naval power. and it was mainly due to their control of the seas around Ashka thanks to Poseidon. Of course, Athens would go on to defeat the Persians, but I think Poseidon had a hand in that as well. That's because the Persians relied heavily on their navy to invade Greece, which means Poseidon probably let them win just so he could mess with the Persians later. Poseidon is often portrayed as vengeful in these early sources, but you will notice something missing: any mention of earthquakes. Poseidon's main prerogative in these early sources is the sea. Earthquakes are only mentioned when Poseidon is angry, so although earthquakes do happen, they're not really attributed to Poseidon just yet. It's as if Poseidon has to split the earth in order to show his power. This idea isn't really fleshed out until later, but for now, the Athenians didn't realize that Poseidon was seething beneath the surface. They were celebrating their victory over the gods. The goddess Athena had given them so many blessings, and she expected nothing in return. She wasn't greedy like her brother Apollo, who demanded tribute from the Greeks for the Delphic oracle. No, Athena was perfectly happy with the olive tree. This was a gift from her to the Athenians, and she wanted nothing more. But while Athena gave the Athenians the olive tree, her owl, which had flown off from Athens to tell its mistress about the victory, got caught in a net. When Athena found out about this, she went to the city and rescued the bird. Then she turned the net into stone. Now some scholars say that Athena was punishing the Athenians for mistreating her holy animal, but I don't think that's the case. I think Athena's turning the net to stone was a sign of her changing the fate of those who opposed her. The nets that the Athenians had set to capture the bird were no longer capable of capturing anything. Instead, they would trap whatever they touched. Athena was a wise goddess, but she also knew how to send a message. The Athenians would come to regret this lesson when Poseidon decided to make his move. We can find the story of Poseidon's vengeance in Hesiod's Theogony. Hesiod tells us that Poseidon created 5 strong earthquakes, and after that the earth shook violently for 7 days and nights. After the earthquakes, there was a huge tsunami that hit Athens. All of its citizens were wiped out, except for a few who escaped to the land of Trojan. From there, the survivors sent a letter to the god Apollo, asking him to help. Apollo agreed and raised a great calm so that ships could sail from Trojan to Athens. Once they arrived, the Athenians built a temple to Poseidon and made him an offering of 100 oxen. As a thank you for saving them, Poseidon blessed Athens again with more good things, including horses, but he never forgot the insult the Athenians had thrown at him. His resentment grew and grew, and he waited for another opportunity to strike. Fast forward a couple centuries, and we meet a hero named Theseus. He was the son of Poseidon and the mortal king Aegis, who ruled over the land of Attica before the rise of Athens. One day, Theseus decided to visit the Oracle of Delphi to ask what sacrifice he should make to the gods. Apollo told him to sacrifice a bull, but Theseus didn't want to kill such a fine animal, so he let it go and instead sacrificed a ram. But that angered Apollo, who made Theseus go mad, so Theseus went into the forest and killed his own grandfather. When he came back to his senses, he realized what he had done and felt awful, so he made his way to Delphi and told Apollo about his deeds. The god was satisfied with Theseus' honesty and told him to go to Athens and present himself to King Aegis. If the king took him in, then he would become his heir. If he refused, then Theseus would rule over the land of Marathon. Well, Aegeus didn't know that Theseus was his son. And when he heard that he had killed his father, he assumed that Theseus must have been driven mad by another god. So Aegeus invited Theseus to Athens and formally adopted him. Then together they went to the Oracle of Delphi to find out what god had orchestrated this. And the answer they received shocked them both. The god was Poseidon, who revealed to Theseus that he was actually his son. And then he told them why. You see, when Poseidon created Athens, he didn't just give the Acropolis to Athena. He also gave a part of the city to Hades, god of the underworld. Hades was very happy about this. And to celebrate, he held a banquet. All of the dead heroes and kings were invited. Now, the reason Hades threw this party was to show how powerful he was. It was his way of showing the world that he didn't just rule the underworld, he ruled everything. And who better to show it to than the heroes who had fought in his great war against the Titans? The feast went on for 5 days and 5 nights, and the partygoers drank so much wine that they got drunk and passed out. What happened next is that Persephone, who was Hades' wife, collected the semen of all the dead heroes and sprinkled it across the earth. Where the liquid touched the ground, new plants and trees sprouted. This is why there are so many magical plants in the world, according to this myth. Some helped people, others hurt them. But either way, they came from the heroes who sat at Hades' feast. So when Theseus learned that Poseidon had made him king to punish Athens for forgetting his role in the creation of the city, he wasn't surprised. Sure, Athens had beaten Poseidon once, but he was a god whose power should not be underestimated. So what happens next? Does Athens get punished for forgetting about Poseidon? Or does Poseidon come to his senses and forgive them? Find out next time on Poseidon and the Mysteries of the Greek Ocean. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Poseidon and the Mysteries of the Greek Ocean. If you did, please subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thanks. Bye.